Recording now. Thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. We apologize for the delay, but it is 7:11 on Monday, September 14th, and I am calling to order the school board meeting of St. Louis Park Public Schools. As a reminder, due to the current and federal state emergency declarations and guidance limiting person-to-person contact during the COVID-19 pandemic, this meeting of St. Louis Park School Board is being conducted in accordance with Minnesota Statutes 13D.021 and pursuant to a motion made in a March board meeting to convert all future meetings to electronic meetings. So first up this evening, we are going to approve the agenda. First, we will have the superintendent's report. Next, we will have discussion items. First up there will be the Youth Data Analyst Interns presentation, which we are all very much looking forward to. And then it was going to be the school start and safe learning plan update, but actually we would like to amend the agenda to move the curriculum review update for gifted and talented enrichment services to the second item of the discussion items this evening to, out of respect for the time of our teachers who are graciously joining us this evening. We want them to be able to bow out and as soon as possible too. So would there be a motion to amend the agenda to move curriculum review update to item 2?
So moved.
Moved by Karen. Is there a second?
I'll second Colin here.
Second by Colin. Thank you. And again, as a reminder of the rules for 13D.021, there must be a roll call for all votes. So Laura McClendon as clerk will do that roll call, please.
Hey, Mary Tomback.
Aye.
Ann Casey.
Aye.
Ken Morrison.
Aye.
Karen Waters.
Aye.
Colin Cox.
Aye.
Heather Wilsey.
Aye.
And Laura McClendon. Aye.
Okay, that passes 7-0. Thanks, everybody. So after this curriculum review update, we will have school start and safe learning plan update. Then the superintendent evaluation summary, then policy development reading 522, student sex non-discrimination, policy development second readings of policies 536 and 808, that's gender inclusion and face covering. Then we will have our consent agenda. On the action agenda after that, we will have Minnesota Department of Education IOWA resolution, Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission reappointments, and the approval of an employment agreement, followed by communications and transmittals. Is there a motion to approve the amended agenda?
I so move.
That's Anne. Is there a second?
I'll second. John?
Ken, that was you, I'm sorry?
Yes,
Okay.
it was.
Thank you. All right, Laura?
Mary Tomback.
Aye.
Ann Casey.
Aye.
Ken Morrison.
Aye.
Karen Waters.
Aye.
Colin Cox.
Aye.
Heather Wilsey.
Aye.
Laura McClendon. Aye.
Okay, that passes 7-0. Superintendent Osai, your report, please.
Good evening, Chair Tomback, members of the board. This evening for my report, I would like to highlight a couple of items, two of which recognize the outstanding accomplishments of our students here in St. Louis Park Public Schools. I would like to start off by congratulating 5 St. Louis Park High School seniors who have recently been recognized by the National Merit Scholarship Program as National Merit Semifinalists. The 5 seniors are Torwald Anderson, Daniel Goldenberg, Gabriel Kaplan, Dahlia Krebs, and Joshua Kruger. They are among 288 students from Minnesota and approximately 1,600 students from across the country to be named as semifinalists this year. As you may be aware, the National Merit Semifinalists are selected based on scores from their PSAT scores and are now eligible to compete for scholarships worth more than $30 million that will be awarded in the spring of 2021. Semifinalists score in the top 1% of approximately 1.5 million students who took the PSAT as juniors. Next, I would like to acknowledge a student who we weren't aware of at the time of recognizing our IB diploma candidates at our August 17th meeting. After that meeting, we learned that Samantha Kelfer was also recognized as an IB diploma recipient. And I would just like to take this moment to congratulate her and our other 8 IB diploma candidates who accomplished a great deal of academic success here in St. Louis Park Public Schools, and we wish them the best in their post-secondary experience. Lastly, I would just like to remind all of our families that are tuning in this evening and make sure that they're aware that we have free breakfast and lunch for all students. So we learned about 3 weeks ago that the federal government continued their free meal program, and we just want to encourage our students to take advantage of this opportunity. And on the slide in front of you, I've noted that lunches and breakfasts are available for pickup on Mondays and Wednesdays, and we have extended our time from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. for students and or parents or guardians to pick up meals. And that concludes my report for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Osai. Next, we are very, very grateful to have with us this evening some of our students who are going to talk to us about their experiences as Youth Data Analyst Interns. And so to introduce them and their presentation is Dr. Sylvie Lafayette.
Good evening, Chair Tomback, Superintendent Osai, members of the board. Thank you for having me and our Youth Data Analyst Interns here tonight. I'm trying to share my screen. I'm wondering, Flower, do I need?
1 second.
Superintendent Osai will just need to stop sharing his, and then you'll be able to take over.
And Dr. Lafayette, I would like to call out the other staff member who's with us tonight, Gao Thor,
Yes,
right?
Sally
Gao is here?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Gao. Thank you.
All right.
I don't need to give the cabinet members all of the spotlight, right?
Yes. So thank you for having us here tonight. So I wanted to start off this sharing by sharing this quote with you that from a text that our interns read with Ms. Thor and myself this summer, coming from Dr. Bettina Love at the University of Georgia, right? So this book that was published in 2019 is We Want to Do More Than Survive, Abolitionist Teaching and the Pursuit of Educational Freedom. And I know a lot of my teacher colleagues in the district have also read this book, but this quote I think sums up what Gao and I were envisioning for the data advance that we had just a couple weeks ago on August 13th. But I just wanted to read this quote. Freedom dreaming is imagining worlds that are just, representing people's full humanity, centering people left on the edges, thriving in solidarity with folks from different identities who have struggled together for justice, and knowing that dreams are just around the corner with the might of people power. So we wanted to do 2 things for the data advance this summer. We wanted to center a group of students whose data tends to be marginalized, not just in St. Louis Park, but just the way that we talk about data in general in the summertime when we're thinking about goals for the upcoming school year. So the day before the data advance, we shared some of our data from our multilingual language learners, otherwise known as English language learners in our district. And we asked our leaders to think about what is the experiences of our students who are multilingual language learners, right? Thinking about their experience, which then helps us to think about what's happening with our students of color in the classroom, or our students with an IEP, or our students who are on free and reduced price lunch, including our white students, when we think about the experiences of our MLL students. And then we also wanted to really center student voice this summer. Last year, when I came into the district, we started by bringing some youth to join us at the data advance, and you're gonna see in the presentation later this evening how we really tried to be very intentional about having our students also help us to study and analyze the data that we have. So I want to start off by saying that in St. Louis Park, every August there is a data advance. Normally that data advance focuses on our state proficiency tests, our standardized tests, where we look at reading, math, science proficiency according to our federal policy, right? So Every Student Succeeds Act, as well as our state policy, our World's Best Workforce Plan. So usually there are lots of quantitative metrics that we examine in order to think about what happened last year so we can create goals for the school year. Well, with the pandemic, we kind of took the opportunity, because we didn't have these metrics, we didn't have most of these data points, we took an opportunity to take a step back and to think about what is it that these standardized data points are supposed to help us understand. As imperfect and as critiqued as these standardized tests are, as well as imperfect as these state and federal policies are, right? But at its core, what these policies and what these standardized data points are helping us to understand is, one, do all students in our schools have access to grade level standards and quality instruction? And the way that we define quality instruction in St. Louis Park is culturally relevant pedagogy. And then number two, are all of our students set up for success in college and career pathways? And then number three, which is why we have to disaggregate the data along lines of federal ethnicity, as well as thinking about our special student groups as our English language learners, our students with an IEP, and students on free and reduced price lunch. Which student groups currently don't have access to numbers 1 and numbers 2? Okay, and then when we focus on these things at its core, what are the goals that we need to create in each of our buildings, thinking about our context, our students, our families, our teachers? What goals do we need to create in order to effectively address our response to these questions? And that's what the data advance is, that's what the data advance serves as every August. So I just wanted to quickly bring in the balanced assessment system to talk about how, again, as imperfect as these standardized data points are, and the purpose of the standardized data point is to help us understand what is happening in terms of teaching and learning every single day. Because what we know is that these standardized data points don't tell us the capacity of our kids and how smart they are. These data points also don't tell us how hard our individual teachers are working. What these data points are supposed to help us do, our MCA tests, our access tests, our MAP tests, is supposed to help us understand which students are currently getting access to grade level standards in terms of quality instruction, in terms of how those standards are placed into lesson plans, how that instruction is delivered, how assessments are created, and then how that data is analyzed in terms of grade level and department teams. And then the orange system, which is part of the balanced assessment system, is having an impact on student learning every single day. It's not about the standardized tests having an impact on student learning. This helps us understand what's happening in the orange system. And as you're going to hear in our students' presentation, as well as probably their live Q&A, is who is it, which students in St. Louis Park, in Minnesota schools, I would argue, or across the country, are currently getting access to what we call quality instruction in terms of academic achievement, academic rigor, cultural competency, and access to socio-political consciousness, right? So with that, the day before the data advance, what we did was, again, we wanted to center a group that was considered marginalized in terms of our larger data sets. And so we brought in our access data, which we were actually able to administer last spring. So access testing looks at 4 domains for our English language learners. It looks at listening, speaking, reading, and writing in terms of English language proficiency. And so what we did the day before the data advance was we disaggregated this data based on grade level, kindergarten, first grade, all the way through 12th grade. And then what we asked our leaders, our principals, to do was to think about, when we take a look at this disaggregated access data, what does it look like, sound like, and feel like when you walk into these different classrooms in the different buildings that we have? What we see in the access data for our English language learners or our multilingual language learners is that we have very proficient listeners in English. We have really high scores when it comes to that. But when it comes to speaking, reading, and writing, we're kind of all over the place. So thinking about how that instruction is being delivered, how lesson planning looks like in terms of our multilingual language students. And when we imagine walking through those classrooms, what about the students of color and the students with an IEP and the students on free and reduced price lunch sitting in those classrooms? What does their experience look like, sound like, and feel like as well? And so when we talk about that, we also asked our leaders to think about, so what parts of the orange system right here do we need to prioritize based on our MLL students' current access to standards and quality instruction when we think about what their experience looks like? And when we center our MLL students, when we're thinking about lesson planning, design, and instruction, who else in the classroom would benefit? What happens to the academic engagement and achievement of our students of color, students with an IEP, and our students on free and reduced price lunch? And also what we asked our leaders to think about was, what impact do MLL's current learning experience in St. Louis Park have on their college and career pathway? And for Gao and I, this question was really important because in the fall, Dr. Duffy asked us to collect some qualitative data to help our MLL design team of teachers who was currently looking at our programming. So we had the opportunity, so Gao actually had the opportunity to lead some focus groups with elementary school students, middle school students, and high school students. And what we did was we looked at the literature of what helps with the achievement of MLL students. And from that, we crafted some questions. And two of the questions that we asked each focus group was, what are your hopes and dreams? And what do you want to be when you grow up? And overwhelmingly, what we found as a really large theme was that most of our MLL students dream of going to college. And that dream comes from their hopes and dreams of their families as well as for themselves. And then the second largest theme that we found in that particular question was that most of our MLL students want to enter into a career that's related to the science field. A lot of them, as you can see, want to be an engineer, a doctor, a dentist. Some of them even talked about wanting to be an athlete, and if that didn't work out, they wanted to fall back on college. And then also we had a group of students that identified teaching. They wanted to go back into schools and to be a teacher as well. And then there was a subset of students that also said, you know, they felt like dropping out. And an overwhelming theme that came from the students that identified dropping out as a possibility was the feeling that they could never exit from MLL. So after having the opportunity to sit with the quantitative data for this past year, because I've been in my role for a year, Gao and I have been in a lot of discussions around these two really important questions. One, do we believe that all students in St. Louis Park can achieve academically? And two, which student groups have access to this belief and which student groups don't? But most importantly for Gao and I, we wanted to know, what is it that our students think about these questions and about their experience in our schools? So this summer, with the help of funding from outside sources, as well as a little bit from our department that we saved, we hired 6 Youth Data Analyst Interns. And this particular program that we developed for the summer was based off of some work that I did with undergraduate students at the University of Minnesota. We designed this internship to be a 7-week-long internship that had a syllabus attached to it. Each week of the internship, there was a question that we asked that helped us to understand what was happening in terms of our quantitative data in St. Louis Park. So we had a guiding question. We had quantitative data, as you can see an example that's on the wall right there. And then we asked students to think about their own lived experience. We provided research each week that related to the topic of the data that we shared. And most of the research was academic articles or text research books that were recently published, mostly by scholars of color. And we also included writings that you're gonna hear about from scholars of color to help us think about this opportunity gap conversation as it relates to St. Louis Park, but most importantly, as it relates to our 6 Youth Data Analyst Interns' lived experiences. So they did that for a couple weeks, and in the middle of their internship, they also had 3 major projects. 1, they had to do a racial autobiography. 2, they had to submit a research proposal in the middle of the internship. And 3, the very last thing that they had to turn in, which was kind of the summative for the internship, is a research project that you're about to hear. And so they each had to develop, for their research proposal, they had to develop a research question. Luckily, most of them were asking the same question. And so then that question became their research project. And with the research project, what they were asked to do was to collect some data that would help our system to become smarter, and then also provide recommendations for our leaders as they think about the continuous improvement planning goals that they were going to be creating for their buildings E12. And with that, I am going to play a video. Okay. All right. Okay, so parts of the presentation that you're going to hear tonight, I know that members of the board over the weekend, you got to hear the entire 45-minute presentation, but for tonight's audience, what we wanted to share was the introduction to who our interns are, because I think that is the most important part, because their identities and their lived experiences were the huge foundation that helped to shape this project. So we're going to share the beginning, but then at the end, towards the end, we're going to share their recommendations, because what I heard our interns say was, if we got nothing at all as the adults in the system from their work this summer, we needed to listen to their recommendations. So we're going to share that. And we have at least 3 of our interns this evening here for a live Q&A. All right. And with that said, I will start.
Hi everyone, my name is Ms. Thor. I'm the Assessment and Research Specialist for our school district, and we just wanted to welcome you all to our recording of the presentation for our Youth Data Analyst Summer Research Project. I'm really excited to have you all hear what the interns have been working on all summer, and without further ado, I'm just gonna hand it off to Danny to get it started.
So here's a picture of all of us interns. Now we're each going to tell you a little bit about ourselves.
Hi, my name is Adam Elmi, and as a Somali American student having taken a full course load of AP/IB honors courses, I have a unique perspective based on my experience in those classes, as well as my experience taking PSEO/dual enrollment classes.
Hi, I'm Oma Beaton. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm going to be a junior. And for me, as a white female student with mixed heritage, I think I've had a very privileged experience in Fitness Park schools, and then also a very unique lens because I also, like Adam, have taken the full AP and IB course load in my time at SLP.
And my name is Ezra Hudson, and this research has affected me because I am a Black male that is in and has taken multiple higher level classes at St. Louis Park High School. And throughout my experience in these classes, I've often been one of the 2 Black males in the class. And this is hard sometimes because it can be discouraging to walk into a class where you know you belong and be told otherwise by the social structure and the stereotypes of these high level classes. And that's part of the reason I wanted to choose our research question. So our research and our data can eventually lead to getting more kids that look like me in the high level classes.
Hi, my name is Danny Shope. I'm going to be a junior at SLP, and being a white student at Susan Lindgren Elementary School, the middle school, and the high school, I've had a privileged experience. I've taken AP, IB, and honors classes at the high school, and participating in this research project has been an eye-opening experience, which has changed my perspective in those classes.
Hello, my name is Helen Tafara, and I will be senior this year. Me and my family immigrated to the United States of America in 2017. With the limited English without a friend, it was hard for me in St. Louis Park High School. Luckily, I was not a shy person. I can make friends easily. My junior year, I was unhappy to walk in my IB class and see over 20 white students and 3 to 5 students of color. Playing sport and not seeing myself was somber. Learning about the world and not even hearing about my native countries that never been colonized was heartbroken. Going to high school for 3 years and not seeing a teacher of color that I can look up was disappointing. Getting this opportunity is wonderful for me because I don't want MLR students or my siblings to have poor experiences as me.
Hi, my name is Leila Abdal. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm going to be a junior this year. As an Asian student, I haven't always felt heard or seen in the classroom and never really knew how I fit into the conversation of racial issues. I never saw myself in the teachers or other students in my class, but I never really knew how I could change that. By listening to others' experiences at our school, I've realized how privileged my high school experience has been, but more importantly, how much further we really have to go in order to make our school a safe and welcoming place for students of all kinds of backgrounds.
And so through our research, we developed a main and a subset research question. Our main is, how can we get more students of color into honors, AP, IB, and GT courses? And our kind of subset question was, why aren't students of color already in these advanced classes? And when we talk about opportunity gaps and achievement gaps as a group of other students, the topics of AP, IB, and honors classes almost always comes up in SLP. It's actually one of the most visible disparities in our school. You have more white students enrolling in these classes and more white students given the chance to be and succeed in this class. And for example, enrollment in advanced classes may relate to the racial makeup of the teachers. That's one of the reasons we found that students of color may not be in these classes, and also may relate to how culturally relevant the curriculum is. We found that most students of color don't believe class is actually culturally relevant. And then right here, we have a racial makeup of the teachers and other staff at Semifinalists Park High School, and that we believe this may relate to what's happening in our advanced classes.
As a part of this internship, over the last 5 weeks, we have read and discussed as a group 12 excerpts from books and articles which sort of related to our research. And doing those readings was an important part of our research process because it helped guide our research question and helped us form our hypotheses. So it's like, since it was so important to our research process, we decided to share a few of those readings with you and how they helped to lead to our hypotheses. So here's our literature review.
So this slide shows the readings that we did during the Youth Data Analyst Internship. There were a plethora of readings, but these were the primary ones that we utilized when we were forming our research over the summer.
And so the first one we came up with is SLP is failing to encourage students of color to be in high-level classes, which is leading to them being failed when they are in these spaces. And so one of the first books we read was Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me. And in this excerpt, Coates talks about how the school system failed him as a Black male student of color. He talks about how the school system failed him just as bad as the streets did. He also talks about how he had to make a choice about which system they want to be in, the school system or the streets, knowing neither one would truly benefit him. We chose this reading to relate to our research question because part of not having students of color in these high-level classes is because SLP is to encourage, support, and embrace students of color in these classes. And personally, I transferred to Semifinalists Park from Patrick Henry. I remember seeing at Patrick Henry, which is a school with only 6.6% white students, how they failed the school because it was a predominantly student of color school.
Another book we read an excerpt from was Multiplication is for White People, Raising Expectations for Other People's Children by Lisa Delpit. And this reading sort of built on what Ezra just talked about in Between the World and Me. Ezra talked about how the school system was failing students of color, and Delpit goes into how this happens, how this exactly happens in school systems from the perspective of a researcher. So we read and discussed a chapter in this book called There Is No Achievement Gap at Birth. And this chapter was important to our research for a couple of reasons. First of all, Delpit sort of addressed this myth that the opportunity and achievement gaps are out of our control. And she said that we have the ability to change these gaps. We have the ability and the opportunity to change these gaps right now. So the second reason that it was important is because Delpit explained that low expectations from teachers often leads to student disengagement, and more often than not, the students on the receiving end of those low expectations were students of color. So that led to our second hypothesis, which is that low teacher expectations leads to fewer students of color in advanced classes.
So the book that I have for my hypotheses was Subtractive Schooling by Angela Valenzuela, based on the U.S. Mexican youth and the politics of caring. So I myself, looking at this book, think back to my elementary education and believe keenly that my third grade teacher had a profound effect on my academic confidence throughout the years after in my academic experience, because she truly cared for me authentically and asked me about how I was every single day stepping into class. And that led to me being more confident, making more academic and educational geared choices and believing that I could complete them. So the hypothesis that I formulated from this reading was that students who receive authentic care from teachers early on in education tend to feel more academically confident in the future.
So at the beginning, we all shared a little bit about who we are racially and ethnically. Now I'll go a bit more in depth into how our identities have impacted how we handled this project. In addition to weekly readings, each week we were given around 3 prompts that we answered and turned in as a form of weekly journal entries. These entries really forced us to dive deep into this topic. Through these entries, we reflected on our own experiences and things we had seen around our school. Putting our readings and our personal experiences together led us all to begin questioning how well our school was serving its students. Through our weekly journal entries, we reflected on our findings and figured out what topics we were passionate about. Our group of interns is a pretty diverse one. We are made up of males and females and represent a pretty large age range, from incoming juniors to a high school graduate. We also represent a fairly large range of races. This allowed our group to hear from many different perspectives and backgrounds. Because we each had different experiences based on race, gender, or other factors, we were able to look at the systematic issues in our school through many different lenses. Though it must be noted, of course, with our small numbers, there are many perspectives that were not fully represented in our group. This is why interviews and surveys were so essential to our research project. They allowed us to hear from types of people that aren't heard from in our small group. For example, we are all in higher level classes, and while this allows us to give our perspectives on what the classroom culture is in such classes, we can't really testify or compare these experiences to those in a regular level class. Because we all go to or have gone to St. Louis Park High School, we can see firsthand the issues that are present in our school. As students of SLP, we know that there are a lot of things in our school that could be improved upon in order to better serve its students. The main thing that came up for most of us was seeing an astounding lack of students of color in honors, IB, and AP classes. Because each of us have all taken at least one of those classes during our time at SLP, we've seen firsthand the lack of diversity in such classes. A lot of times, board members or other people in positions of power make decisions for their students without hearing from the main group that will be affected by these decisions, the students. In order to make sure that the school is serving its students to the best of its ability, it is essential to hear from students, as they can testify as to what goes on a daily basis.
When we were kind of investigating different research methods, we ended up picking surveys and interviews because we wanted to both collect qualitative and quantitative data. And by doing that, we could get a broader understanding of the student experiences in AP and IB class.
All right, and for the purpose of time for this evening, we won't be sharing the quantitative and the qualitative data, although it was extremely powerful. Our interns did tremendous work. They collected over 300 survey responses using social media, and
He's got surveillance cameras everywhere, points everywhere.
And so they collected over 300 survey responses after they went through a process of creating their survey. And then in order to go deeper into the survey responses, they also conducted 52 in-depth interviews with students in St. Louis Park High School from racially different backgrounds. And in their presentation, they included different quotes that illustrated the experiences that were different based on the race of different students. So I want to fast forward here to their recommendations so that we can hand it over for their live Q&A. So I'll just move to. Okay. Oops. Sorry. Okay.
Describe it as just like this exclusive bubble. So yeah.
And so coming back to our original hypothesis, my first one was SLP is failing to encourage students of color to be in high level classes, which is leading to them being failed in these spaces. And I think based off our research that we presented to you so far, this is all coming back to this.
And our second hypothesis was that low expectations among teachers and educators is causing students of color not to enroll or stay in advanced classes. And I think we saw both through our interview data, which we showed you in the or our interview data and our survey data, which we showed you in the graphs, that Black and brown students do receive lower expectations from teachers than white students. And we can, assume that that does lead to fewer students of color in advanced classes.
And for our last hypothesis, coming back to it, is students who receive authentic care from teachers early on in the education tend to feel more academically confident in the future. I believe this also wraps our research together pretty good, because it's based off what we presented so far. I do believe that authentic care is a large part of the student's success.
So now that we've shown you some of our data, both through the survey data and the interview data, we're going to give you some recommendations for the school district moving forward. And I think this is the most important part of our presentation. So, if you're going to tune in for any part of the presentation, now would be the time to kind of tune in. And also a reminder that this is for the entire school district and every school in the school district from early learning to 12th grade. Even though a lot of the data we collected was from high school students, all of the recommendations that we're giving apply to all students and all teachers.
One of the first things we need to do in this district is hire more teachers of color, and specifically hire more teachers of color for all level of classes, and assign teachers of color to advanced classes. And some of the reasons we need to do this is because students of color would be more interested and stay in these classes if they were with someone that represented them personally. And white students would also benefit from the perspective of having a teacher of color teaching them. And staff of color will bring different racial perspectives that will benefit SLP's mostly white teachers at 88.5%.
Our next recommendation is that we need to ensure that our educators are encouraging students. And we've learned that student encouragement
So I believe we may have lost, I think Sylvie may have lost her connection. Sylvie. So what we can do in the interim, as it appears that the connection was lost on her end, and I know that she was broadcasting the video recording, is at this point, it might be a good opportunity for us to engage in some of the question and answer component of the presentation. And for our youth data analyst on the call, I know that there were a couple of recommendations that were missed by the video ending prematurely. If you all would like to share those recommendations, and then we can engage in some question and answering, I think that would be great. So of those of you that are on, is anyone willing to start us off by finishing the recommendations that we missed based on the video being cut off?
It's on page 62 of the board book, is number 3. That's where we were getting queued up on the video.
Yes, and I can just share my screen real quick. If that's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you, Danny.
Okay.
And then our fourth recommendation was actively recruiting students of color into advanced classes. So this will look like a team of recruiters, including teachers, counselors, and students of color, going into all levels of classes and encourage.
All right. Yep. Go ahead, Danny.
Now that Dr. Lafayette is back, should we just keep playing the video?
So Dr. Lafayette, what we were going to do, just simply because we were having a technical difficulty, is I was going to have the Youth Data Analyst share the last couple of recommendations that we missed when the video cut off, and then jump into the Q&A if that was okay.
Did my internet cut off? I'm sorry, I didn't even notice because the video was playing. Okay.
Okay, so I guess we can just present those right now.
Thank you.
Let's see. How do I do this? Bear with me for a second.
I think it's okay to just read them out loud too, and people who want to have access to the whole presentation can get that from the school district website.
Okay. I think I should have it here. If I can just figure out how to present. Okay. So I'm not sure what presentation or what recommendation we ended on, so I guess we can just go through all of them. I'll start off with the first one. And so our first recommendation to the school district was to hire more teachers of color. And what this looks like, it's pretty self-explanatory, just hiring more teachers of color for all levels of classes. So that means, first of all, when we looked at some of the data that Dr. Lafayette and Gao showed us, like hiring data for the school district, we saw that there were actually a lot of teachers of color who were applying to get jobs at the school district, but weren't getting accepted. So it's kind of a myth that like there aren't enough teachers of color available for these jobs, which is just not true. But secondly, it's also important to assign those teachers of color to advanced classes, because what often ends up happening is that teachers of color get assigned to the non-advanced classes, the like standard level classes, because it's based on seniority. So that's just how it usually ends up. So it's also important to assign those teachers of color to higher level classes, because that will lead to more students of color choosing to take those advanced classes. And the reasons we should do this, first of all, students of color would be more interested in stay in advanced classes. And also white students would benefit from the perspectives of teachers of color. So it wouldn't just be students of color who are benefiting from this. Also, the staff of color will bring different racial perspectives that would kind of change up the stuff we're looking at right now, which is mostly white teachers, 88.5% white, which is pretty crazy. And I'll pass it off to Lee for the second recommendation.
Yeah, okay, sorry. So our second recommendation was to ensure that educators are encouraging their students. And this goes back to kind of authentic care, which Adam talked about earlier. So this would look like implicit bias and racial equity training for all teachers and staff, and introducing something reflecting on their own racial autobiographies, which is what we did actually at the beginning of this internship, which I felt was really, really helpful. Just kind of checking yourself and thinking about how racial issues affect you, and then sharing these with their students for teachers. This will also look like teachers and counselors encouraging all students to take AP, IB, and honors classes based on student interest, rather than if they had been on that track before. And this is really important because we found through interview and survey data that students of color are more likely to be discouraged to take advanced classes. So it's important to really focus and try to get them into advanced classes. And we really need to take down this barrier. And then our third recommendation was to create some sort of system to reach out and connect with families. So this would look like, firstly, school administrators reaching out to families directly about enrolling in advanced classes. This could be by email, call, or any number of ways. One example would be some sort of open house where families could learn about advanced classes as well as have a chance to make more quality connections and relationships with teachers. So it's important to reach out to families because some families might not understand how advanced classes are different from regular level classes. And once they do, the family can better support and encourage the student, which would certainly make them more inclined to take these classes. In addition, reaching out personally helps to create bonds and allows not only the family to learn, but also the teacher to learn about a student's home culture or circumstances. This ties into the idea of authentic care that the Valenzuela passage and Adam talked about earlier. And then our next recommendation was to actively recruit students of color into advanced classes. So this would look like a team of recruiters, including a team of teachers, counselors, and students of all colors, going into all levels of classes and encouraging students of color into advanced classes. This recruitment would bridge between grades and schools. For example, high school students could go to middle school, and middle school students could go to elementary schools. Similarly, this could look like creating a class or seminar specifically meant to help support students moving into advanced classes from regular level classes. Advanced classes are seen as exclusive and hard to get into, so creating recruitment opportunities would really help try to eliminate that. So yeah, recruitment strategies are important to make these classes more welcoming. I'll pass it off.
Okay, I'll take this one. So our fifth recommendation was to make the Gifted and Talented program beneficial to all students. So the first and most obvious thing to me that this would look like is changing the name of the Gifted and Talented program. And because right now, you know, Gifted and Talented, it implies that students who aren't in the Gifted and Talented program can't be gifted and talented, which is obviously not true and just very unhealthy. And the second recommendation, the second part of this recommendation is to make the Gifted and Talented program from all the way from elementary school into middle school and high school. That program should be for everyone. So, you know, we talked about how the students who are in Gifted and Talented receive better supports, both academically and like through academic confidence and teaching supports and stuff. Just all around, students who are in GT, who are in the GT program, receive better supports than students who aren't in the GT program. So the only way to really make this better, because right now, you know, there are some kids who are in GT who are getting these better supports, and some students who aren't in GT who aren't getting the better supports. So that's just inherently unequal. And the only way to really change that is to make the Gifted and Talented program available for everyone, because the way we're teaching those students who are in GT should be the way that we're teaching all students, right? So especially at the high school, you know, there are college readiness and stress relief supports provided by the Gifted and Talented program. And I've heard from a lot of people that those supports are just really, really helpful. So that program, you know, those supports, everyone needs college readiness supports and stress relief supports. So those should really just be for everyone. And the reasons we should do this is that, first of all, GT testing is ineffective. So, you know, we're telling some students that they're gifted and talented based on just some standardized test scores, which are flawed for a lot of reasons. And the second reason is that GT is exclusive. So the Gifted and Talented program, it's just really this exclusive little bubble, which ends up being mostly white students. And, you know, again, those students are receiving better supports than the students who aren't in GT. So I'll pass off to Helen for the next recommendation.
Thank you, Danny. Okay, so the sixth recommendation is a meaningful relationship to building meaningful relationship with the students of color. So what that looks like is all teachers are engaged with students of color, all teachers pay attention to students' interests, and they will work from personal relationship with the students of color. And what that looks like and why is this important is because if a student engages with a student, if teachers engage with students of color in advanced class, those students will feel more comfortable. And if teacher listens to a student's story and about like how the student is doing, why the student is having the grade that they're having, and see it from their personal view, then it will be easy for the student of color to be in that class. Because feeling uncomfortable in advanced class is one big barrier of a student of color in advanced class. And I will pass it to Lee.
So our 7th recommendation was to teach culturally relevant and anti-racist curriculum. So this would be using curriculum that is relevant to students of color and offering a variety of class choices. This would also look like getting rid of AP contracts and similar practices, because this, again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, creates a feeling of like exclusivity and just really like these classes are really hard to get into, and that is very discouraging. So all teachers, no matter the student's age, are responsible. This goes from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade. So this is really important because it's more engaging, and also we found through interviews and surveys that curriculum is a barrier for students of color taking advanced classes. Anti-racist curriculum expands the horizons of all students, not just students of color, also white students. And I'll pass it to Danny.
Actually, Helen, do you want to take this last one?
Sure. Okay, our 8th recommendation is to, Our 8th recommendation is to require students to lead professional develop. Why? Because a student rather than students rather than education lead some professional develop session, and activity requires student of color to read a professional develop. A student will coach the education on, and why is this? Because if a student of color and other students are in this professional develop, student have the professional that teachers don't, like a student know what the teachers don't know in the building, and the PD should be adapted to school environment. And like a student can volunteer and like a student can volunteer in there and be there and tell each other like, so for example, I will be more open to students more than the teacher. So if a student are leading this thing, other student can be more open to them and they can talk more openly about this together rather than teachers.
Okay. And I guess we'll open up for questions now. Thanks for listening to our recommendations.
This is Ken. Can you hear me okay? Good.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. This is spot on. I'm not going to waste a whole lot of time on empty words. What's our next step? Who's going to take control and take charge of driving this to fruition? This is better than I've seen for a long time on an action plan. And I've run some process improvement at a major corporation, and you guys have done a fantastic job at laying out steps that someone can just pick up and take and put action to plan. And that's all I'm wondering. Good job, guys.
I think that's probably a question that's geared more towards the staff, the cabinet and staff, about what is the plan to take forth these students' recommendations.
Chair Tombeck, what I would offer is the next presentation will be talking about our Gifted and Talented and Enrichment Program review update. I know that the members of that team have had an opportunity to hear this presentation and learn from our student youth data analyst interns. And I would anticipate that what our students have offered us will influence the direction and the work that we'll be doing as it relates to revising our current gifted and talented and enrichment programming moving forward. So from a next step standpoint is that we're planning on continuing to implement our review process and really trying to leverage the work of these students.
I can add too that I made so many notes of what you all recommended and we're talking about and the whys around that. So I would hope that as a board can, in response to that question, that we all can use your recommendations to be continuing to hold ourselves accountable and to be holding the superintendent of SCI and the cabinet accountable for continuing to make progress. So who else has questions?
Also, I just want to add that for our recommendations, I think you probably noticed that we gave a what and a why for all of our recommendations, and I guess the next step is like, how are you going to do it? So what we were thinking is that based on our recommendations, moving forward, we can pass this off to teachers and principals and you guys on the school board to sort of figure out that next step to like actually implement it.
I have a question. This is Heather.
Go ahead, Heather.
I mean, first of all, as a teacher, I just can't, I'm just floored. This is just amazing. I would give anything to have students doing my professional development as opposed to the professionals that we pay a lot of money to come in and do. I think that would be the most authentic, incredible training any of us could have. So my question is a little offhanded, but can we bring this work to my district where I teach? Because this is just great work, you guys. And thank you, Sylvie, for spearheading this. And thank you to all the interns for your really hard work on this.
So I had a question for our students. I'm really curious about the relationship component. We talk a lot about right now social emotional learning, and EQ is just as important as IQ. But when you were doing the survey of the older kids, Lee, you had mentioned in 3rd grade you had a connection with a teacher who helped you see something in yourself. And I'm wondering if the group of students had a sense of at what grade point did you feel that you were just a number to your teacher as opposed to in relationship with your teachers? Because I think intuitively, elementary, that's the easy way to start building relationship, but we're asking to have relationship E12, but clearly there's a cutoff, and I'm kind of curious as to when you think that change hit in your lived experience.
I can just start off here. But I think for me, I don't think there was any like sort of cutoff where I thought like, oh, I'm just a number now. I feel like a lot of my teachers do, we talked about authentic care, and I feel like a lot of my teachers do, even in high school, like authentically care about me. You know, they ask me questions about, you know, we share like similar interests outside of school, but also I'm white. And I think it's important to remember that the authentic care we're talking about is specifically, you know, it's for all students, but the part that we need to work on the most is for students of color and making sure that teachers are connecting with students of color in those advanced classes.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think personally I could like pinpoint a time where I like stopped and I thought, oh, well, I'm just a number. But definitely after elementary school, just having a bunch of different teachers, and obviously like I get it's really hard to build authentic care having so many students in so many different classes. but definitely then I guess I would say when it became a little harder to create like actual relationships with teachers for me.
Thank
For
you.
me, so sorry. For me, my freshman year of high school, that's when I came to America. So I had a good connection with my EL teachers, and I still do. But in other class, I can like count one or two teachers who liked me and talked to me and like had interested even in knowing me, just because like I was so quiet and I just sit there. They like call me and ask me, why are you so quiet, and something like that. Other than that, like I don't remember anything like that.
Any other board members have any questions for our students or Gao or Sylvie?
I don't think I have a question as much. Again, it's just an appreciation for it. I think I'm sort of thinking it through and using it and comparing it, to, not comparing, but thinking about some of the conversations I've had with people in the community and some things that support what we've heard here. And so I just am appreciative. And like I said, probably going to sit here and probably think about this a little bit more and probably have questions for the next, 3.5 years. So thank you for presenting this. Thank you.
I just have appreciation. Thank you, students, and please pass our gratitude on to your peers who are here as well. This is just awesome. I'm literally in awe of the work that you've done this summer in a tough time. You guys came together and produced something that, like others have said, is better than sometimes from professionals. So you are the professionals now. We're grateful, and thank you. Thanks for being here.
Laura, did you have anything? I didn't want to skip over you.
That's fine. I have a lot of questions, but I just want to give a huge shout out to the students. You guys took the role of being leaders, and I'm absolutely amazed by the work that you've done. From my perspective as a Black female teacher, I'm very proud, and I hope to see really great things from all of you. You guys have kind of upped the game for yourself. You put on some big shoes and you got to wear them, but I hope that you guys can take your experience and your voice, and that you are able to come and talk to a bunch of adults who end up making decisions, but you guys have influenced us. And I want you to know that, and that we will take your recommendations seriously. And please continue to be leaders in the school community, because we really need students like you, especially those of you that are going to be graduating and going off into the so-called real world. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Keep up the great work.
And I will just add, of course, how grateful we are for you all again to have come here tonight and shared all of this with us. We have heard, those of us who've been on the board for a few years have heard, unfortunately, many different times and occasions of students talking about experiences that are lining up with your research, but this is the first time that I've been able to really wrap my head around some concrete solutions and some tangible ideas of what we do about this problem. So thank you doesn't seem good enough, and I will extend that as well then to Dr. Lafayette and to Ms. Thor for putting together such an really comprehensive. I had a lot of internships growing up, and I never did anything that looked this substantive, this thought-provoking, this real, in its application and its worth. So I can imagine that this was a lot of work for both of you to put together this program. And so I'm just so grateful to you for doing that and providing our students this opportunity to learn and then to teach us. And so then finally, I also truly, especially with all gratitude, need to thank the Greater Twin Cities United Way, because if you had not funded this program with your very generous grant of $25,000 for the Career Academy Summer Stabilization Fund, this wouldn't have been possible. And I just want to call out the fact that there were 20 student interns throughout the district over this summer. We had 2 in the communications department working on the strategic plan and the back to school plan, 2 working in the Children's First program doing communications and strategic planning. 4, oh, that was you guys, 6 of you. Youth Frontiers, Communications and School Relations had 2. Muddy Paws Cheesecake had 4 interns working on business communication, sales, and social media. And then Twin West had 6 interns on project management and design thinking. And so this funding was intended to provide meaningful paid work experiences that aligned with our high school career pathways and for students who may not have otherwise had the opportunities to do internships this summer due to COVID. So these internships reflected multiple industries to support student learning and exploration. And so we really, I want to also add this comment that I got from a parent who sent this message to me, just in continued gratitude to the United Way and all of the staff who supervise and community volunteers who supervise these interns. This parent said that she was so grateful that her son was able to be part of this team. As a student, the opportunity to be part of such an academically rigorous project allowed him to grow in many ways that will benefit him over the course of his academic career. But more importantly, having the experience of working on a project that was impactful for him, as well as his community, was transformative to him as a person. So this family wanted to add that they are very grateful for the generosity of the United Way for making this possible, and they are grateful to be part of a district that works hard to examine itself as it works to do better for all of its students, and that values the voices of students in this work. So I know that was a lot of thank yous, but this is just too big of a deal to have short shrifted the gratitude. So many, many thanks to everyone who worked so hard to make this happen for the benefit of our entire district. Okay, so again, students, you're out of here. Feel free to be done. Thank you so much for coming. All right, next up, we are going to transition quite nicely into Gifted and Talented and Enrichment Program Review Update. Is this Dr. Duffy who's going to be starting us off?
Yes, I will start. This is Patrick Duffy, Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Chair Tom Beck, members of the board, Superintendent Osai. I'm honored to be here tonight to introduce our Gifted and Talented and Enrichment Program team. It's not a coincidence that they are here tonight to follow up our Youth Data Analysts. And it's not a coincidence that our Youth Data Analysts were speaking about work regarding our gifted and talented and advanced programs within the district. One of the things that I heard you ask earlier was what was going to be our follow-up as a staff and how are we going to hold ourselves accountable to the work that we've been doing. And what I want to say is one of the things that we wanted to do in this work was to engage students like these interns in the process of our review. We clearly, over the past couple of years, have started to review a number of curricular areas. But as you know, our multilingual program and our gifted and talented program are also under review, even though they aren't curricular areas. And they are very complicated to review. And if you take a look at the next slide, someone could move us there. If you could click on all three there you go. We have 3 phases to our review process. And over the past roughly 1.5 to 2 years, we have been through phase 1 and 2. And All right, there we go. And phase one, if you take a look at bullet point 3, it becomes very important for our review team to hear and reflect upon student voice and community input about their work. And the work that was done tonight was an essential part of that process. The work that you're going to hear tonight has been driven by racial equity purpose. There's been a lot of development using the intersection and an understanding of the work that was done by the data analysts tonight around advanced placement and IB, as well as an understanding of culturally relevant pedagogy. They've been looking at data in a number of many forms and are currently looking at how they can continue to engage scholars of culturally relevant pedagogy and gifted and talented education. Over the past year, they have engaged one of our greatest local scholars in that work. And I would say that our local scholars here that you just heard from, we've engaged as well and are going to influence our work moving forward. So I'd like to turn it over to our team who will talk about the work that they have been doing, the work that they are doing, and their own recommendations for what we're going to do moving forward as a staff.
Okay, good evening. My name is Ezra Hudson. I am a racial equity instructional coach. I'm also the proud parent of Ezra Hudson, who was an intern this summer. So I'm super proud of their work. The next slide kind of talks about what we heard the student interns say. And what really kind of resonated with us as a team was just their gift of consciousness to us around the urgency of change. So changing the name of the Gifted and Talented program and really making, E through 12th grade should be GT for everyone. And at the high school, college readiness, stress relief support for all students. What is our work in really actively encouraging and recruiting students of color to take advanced classes and IB classes as well. They reminded us of the lack of culturally relevant teaching and the fact that families aren't aware of GT and advanced classes, which are tied to just their beliefs around GT testing and identification processes being ineffective and that GT is exclusive. So we heard that kind of over and over throughout their presentation. And that is really propelling us to move deeper into action around the urgency of change on this design team.
Good evening. My name is Megan Malone, and I am a second grade educator at Peter Hobart. I am also one of the members of our Gifted and Talented design team. And I'm going to practice a best teaching strategy and not read this slide to you and let you go ahead and read that slide to yourself. But our group has been engaging, as Dr. Duffy mentioned, with Dr. Maggie Smith-Peterson from the University of Minnesota. And she has taken our team on a deep dive through the history of gifted and talented education. And we are humbly requesting that the board engage with a session with Dr. Maggie and continue and learn what we have learned. I don't even know where to begin with the amount of learning that we've had from her. Thinking so much about how race has intersected with our gifted and talented program, and learning even that the very beginnings or the origins of gifted and talented program was born out of the eugenics movement. With that, kind of two main takeaways that I've had from my learning is kind of there's two different roads that we often travel in looking at gifted and talented programming. And the first road would be something where we are trying to increase representation within our program. And so trying to make the racial makeup of gifted and talented IB, honors, AP, advanced classes match the racial makeup of our school district is kind of one road that it can be traveled. And another road is one that I heard our student interns request of us, and that is more of a route of detracking and making gifted and talented available to all students.
Hi, this is Kelly Etienne. I'm a GT and interventionist at PSI. And so some changes that we're making this year in elementary, the GT program. So we're going to be working with all of the 3rd through 5th grade teams in a rotating schedule. And our content will be for all students. And it may vary from school to school and even by grade, but it might involve co-teaching, co-planning, or a flipped classroom model in order to give access to all kids in the enrichment classes. And then additionally, there are opportunities in 6th and 7th and 8th grade for students to continue their acceleration in math learning. And then there is a new math curriculum at the middle school and a piloting of a math curriculum happening at the elementary schools. And then I think one more little bullet point that we added in our meeting earlier today that isn't on the slide is kind of something that's happening at the high school. So I'm going to let Al step in here and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, one of the things that, this is Al Wahutka at the high school, work with the GT population, and I'm a science teacher. And one of the things that that's going to be happening this year immediately is my close work as a GT person at the high school with Leanne Stevens in the HAP program. Because when you look at our two programs, we have very similar outcomes, but the reality of it is I'm working with white kids, she's working with kids of color, and that in of itself is problematic. And the two of us working together, I think, will provide a bit of synergy and maybe some blending that'll occur that really the positions will change over time as we work through this year and see how we can support each other and support more of our BIPOC population into the advanced coursework that we offer at the high school. And then if you want to move to the next slide, please. And I do apologize for the lighting. I got booted out. I live in a 4-generation home and I kind of got moved out to the porch. So I have a lousy porch light out here, but I feel like I'm out in the woods with a flashlight on my face telling horror stories. So what we've been, when we listened to the presentation, we felt really good about what we're hearing because it was very much in support of our guiding questions and what we wanted to do initially. So it wasn't as though we were shocked, but as you look at our guiding questions, it matches right in with the recommendations of our student interns, which made us look at, it gave us more momentum, I guess, to move into the work in that we have another set of voices, 300 and some voices, telling us that we're moving in the right direction. And that's what our job is now, is to elicit change in the schools. I was hoping to answer Ken's question with Danny Shope's going to lead us on and tell us how to get this done. But I guess that falls on our shoulders as a school district and especially on the design team. And if we want to move to the next slide, please.
And oh, go ahead. No,
go ahead,
Al.
Deborah. No, you got it. You're all over this. This is your slide.
You play too much, Al. Some of our current and ongoing work is really deep beliefs, right? So just really examining the role of whiteness in GT, identifying how best to grow our capacity to help all students recognize and attain their brilliance. We are gifted with the ability to grow brains and to teach children, and how are we really growing their brains and cultivating that brilliance. That care team work, continuing that, just design team collaboration and research. Our hope is to continue to collaborate and consult with Maggie and really partner with her, and hopefully have a listening session with you after you have heard Dr. Maggie's presentation. So that's some of our current and ongoing work.
Was this back to me? I believe it was. Some of the things that we pulled from the students and that we've also been working with, obviously looking at some redefinition of the terminologies that we use, the whole stigma of gifted and talented, especially those that aren't a part of it, have no talents or gifts, and we know that's problematic. So we're working through that. We need to continue our work with stakeholder groups. I think the group that we heard from as far as the summer interns, there might be some other voices that are not a part of that data that we need to dig into more. We'll bring this back as we continue our work back to our larger consulting team to get more feedback from them. And I know we've looked hard at detracking in K-8. In a big way, math has already moved that direction a bit, and we feel that that's the right thing to do to open up the GT process, the ability for students to reach their own brilliance. We can't keep pulling kids separate and having them be brilliant and others not having that same opportunity. Side note that has very little to do with the presentation, that this was something of interest as Superintendent Osai was spotlighting students. I was looking at the two lists of the National Merit semifinalists, all of which are a part of the GT program at the high school. And then the IB diploma candidates, I think 7 of the 9 that were listed there are also a part of the GT program at the high school. And it made me think, you know, is there a cause and effect in here? I'm not sure, but that's where my brain went. I mean, were the supports there that allowed those kids to reach that brilliance? And we're missing a large chunk of the population, because as I scan those two lists, I don't believe I'm trying to reflect back on the two lists. I don't believe there's a student of color on either list, and so that's hurtful.
Al, there were at least one student of color who was a candidate who did not receive the diploma.
Okay. But my case in point, I mean, I feel like we're providing for some and not for all. And I know we all feel that way. It's not just an I statement, but I'll make it an I statement. And then I believe that was our last slide. And I think the next one says questions for Devray.
You play too much, Al. I see you.
I guess I'll start that this may be more of a comment than a question, but you know, we talk, Al, I think you mentioned this, Devray, you might have too, and I know we all recognize the problem with kids who are never pulled out for GT services in elementary school and how that kind of tells them that they're neither gifted nor talented. I think one of the other things, and I've heard this for years and years and years, one of the other problematic aspects of qualifying for those services is that it varies for the children for whom it varies, or the students for whom it varies. So sometimes you get services and then there's a period of time where you're told you don't get them anymore. And then maybe you go back several months later and then you're kicked out again. And I know that that's not it's not necessarily the fair terminology, but that certainly can be how it feels for students. So what does that do to a student's motivation and ambition and beliefs about his or her own capabilities when there's that fluidity to that label? Yeah. The board members have comments and questions.
Mary, I have maybe a couple of questions here. So again, thanks for this presentation, because I know that we heard some of this stuff before, and it was sort of this, it still has stuck with me in terms of, you know, the kinds of issues that you guys have been tackling and taking this to heart. And so I really appreciate that. And so I think one of my questions is about whether, I was trying to understand this from like a funding or policy perspective. I felt like we came across some gifted and talented wording or something recently, and it felt like that was something that was sort of, I don't know, codified might be a strong word, but I'm trying to figure out how does what we're talking about here align with whatever might be sort of state policy or funding challenges.
There is state guidance and a tiny bit of funding, but not nearly enough to serve its full purpose or intention.
Okay. so then I think my second question was, as I'm scanning through it now, I don't know if I can recall what it is right now. I think I was just trying to think about how this, I know what it was. The second one is, I think you were talking about other stakeholder groups, and I was thinking about parents, and I was thinking about how this stuff will, I know we're early on, but like making sure that parents understand what this context means too. And I know that we're ultimately trying to focus on student success, but I think there's sometimes parent pressure, or there's parent influence, or there's parent concern when we talk about some of these things. So that's not as much of a specific question, maybe as more of just a remark that I'm interested in what that's going to look like as we start to communicate it out. And I know that I've seen a little bit of it being communicated already.
One of the things that we know is that there is some potential for some hurt feelings, some sense of loss to some. And we want to make sure that our ducks are nicely lined up and we're not in a phase of putting small pieces together before we come to, we want to be closer to where we think we have a plan. At least that's my feeling. I shouldn't use we, I should use I. Because we know that we want to have a plan in place rather than, there were some early on thoughts or comments made that we caught through the grapevine of elimination of the GT program. And, that was nothing that we ever even thought about, but it was about changing that. And that's, that's a parent perspective. I understand that. But yeah, we're very cognizant of that.
Okay.
This is Ken. So I want to thank you for this, and it's very helpful. And I'll just jump to the question that I have. So this is the next short-term plan. Do we have are we thinking of the long-term plan for the whole program?
Anyone else? Because I love microphones, but someone else can jump in.
You do have the perfect radio voice.
Go for it.
I have a face for radio. Is that what I heard?
I can try and jump in and tackle this one. So one of the things that our team has thought a lot about is kind of what are some small initial steps, and then what is our long range plan. And I think a lot about it is like we have a system that is not working for all, and I like to think of it like as a metaphor, it's like a really broken home now. And it would be one thing for us to just change the name and to continue to do and provide services in the ways that we are. And that almost feels like just kind of putting a fresh coat of paint on all of this. And so we're really trying to look at what is research telling us, and that's telling us a lot about how all students succeed to high levels when we use a co-teaching model or heterogeneous groupings of students. And so I think you bring up a really great point that is very much on our radar in terms of like what are some initial first steps, and then what are long range steps and what that looks like. Any other team member want to jump in, please feel free.
Well, I can think of some examples of this that we're attempting at the high school. One was the program blend that I mentioned with HAP, which is the high achievement program. Another is, I know with our IB for All initiative, we have put IB and regular physics in the same physical space. Unfortunately, it's now the same virtual space, in an effort to differentiate instruction within that setting to meet the needs of both. And I think that's one of the things, speaking from the high school, that's an area where we need to improve greatly, is on differentiation, so that we can move towards less tracking, if you will.
I'd like to ask too about the middle school. So we talked about the kind of the new plan at the elementary level and the new math setup at the way the new math classes are going at the middle school. But is there, for the, I know this is all very relative in the distance learning environment, but will the plan still be that there will be pullouts for GT services at the middle school right now?
This year, yes.
Okay.
That's my understanding. We met with the leadership at the middle school a bit ago, and although we haven't seen any particular changes there, they're definitely supportive and all in with everything philosophically that we're working toward. It was very apparent. As a matter of fact, I mean, it was more than enthusiastic.
Okay, so stay tuned, I guess.
I
On that.
think so. Well, with the big change in math, I think that that's one change, and that is impactful to us. But from what I understand, like the Lang and Lit stuff is still pull out.
Right, and then and this is just from my experience as a parent. When a child was, qualified for GT, there were any number of classes that they may have just exited for the day. So it may have been their elective, it may have been science that week, it may have been Lang and Lit. And I think that that structure kind of underscores all of kind of the issues that we were talking about with, pullouts.
Yes.
And what does that say to kids, and what is then the makeup of the class you're leaving versus the makeup of the GT program that you're going to. So if that's still the structure, it's going to still, kind of play towards all of the challenges that we've been discussing.
What I'll say is currently the middle school structure in a traditional in-person setting has not changed.
Okay.
There have been no changes to that. For distance learning this fall, all gifted and talented services are going to happen on Wednesdays when synchronous classes are not in session.
Okay, thank you. So we won't have any students at this point leaving any of their regularly scheduled programming, so to speak, for GT at this point at the middle school with the current model. Okay. While I have the mic, so to speak, I will say as chair that I will absolutely 100% quickly work with Superintendent Osai to get the board this professional development along the lines of your recommendation, and then absolutely with Dr. Maggie Smith-Peterson, and then absolutely schedule something back with you all as soon as possible for that listening session. Megan, thank you. I think that's a fantastic idea, and I know that I'm all in, and I imagine most of my colleagues are. I'm seeing heads nodding, yeah, all in as well. So yeah, Superintendent Osai, let's follow up on that this week and get that scheduled. Anyone else have any other
I have
comments?
a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Heather.
Hi, thank you as well for this wonderful presentation and for explaining it all so carefully to us. My question is kind of a basic one, I think. Kelly talked about the new model at the elementary school, and you'll be rotating in with the classroom teachers. So based on that model, are you still going to be administering a test to identify gifted students, or are we going to just get rid of that and give it to everybody and then just move on to middle school?
Well, I'll answer the best I can, but I might need some help from Dr. Duffy. But we're not identifying students for gifted and talented classes per se this year. We'll just be working with all of the students in the grade level. And then we'll kind of rotate. In the IB schools, it will be with their units of inquiry. A PSI will probably follow a kind of a 4 to 6 week, which is similar. Every unit of inquiry is typically about 4 to 6 weeks. So, I'm excited to see how it goes. I'm going to have my first live session tomorrow. I'm working in a flipped model because of the language piece. And we'll just kind of gather the data.
That sounds great. Thank you. That was kind of the answer I was hoping you would be giving.
Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you all of you. Again, you've also been on your computers all day, and you're also volunteered to come here tonight. So thank you so much for your time and all of your work on this. I'm so grateful that it lined up so nicely to hear exactly what our students need from us, and then to have you all talking immediately after about what you're doing to answer their calls and their call to action. So thank you all, and you too, please go, leave, go get some rest.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you very much. Okay, next up, Superintendent Osai is going to be talking to us about this. What is it? Unprecedented, chaotic, surreal time in life, and what we're looking at next steps wise.
Thank you, Chair Tombeck and members of the board. To suggest that the last several months as a superintendent or just an educator in general has been difficult, I would say, is an understatement. And I continue to be encouraged and inspired by the students and adults that you had an opportunity to experience prior to this presentation. You know, it's our students and our adults that often give me hope when I'm encountering situations that sometimes make it seem like the work that we're doing is unattainable to reach the very audacious goals that we've set here in St. Louis Park Public Schools. So I just want to extend my thanks and gratitude for our Youth Data Analyst Interns and our GT and Enrichment Program design team members for sharing with us this evening, because those are the types of things that fill my bucket when, you know, lately there are so many things that are drawing from that bucket. So I want to thank them, and I know that they're going out, but certainly I have a great deal of appreciation for them and the work that they're doing on behalf of all students and staff here and families in St. Louis Park Public Schools. This evening, the purpose of my presentation is to provide the school board with an update on the start of the school year and the work that we continue to do to evaluate our Safe Learning Plan. It is my hope to answer questions that board members have about our work regarding our Safe Learning Plan to the best of my ability. And the piece that I want to highlight there is that the situation that we're dealing with is extremely fluid. And I would say there's not a day that goes by that there isn't new information that either myself or one of my colleagues receives that influences our strategic direction as it relates to creating a safe learning environment for the students and staff here in St. Louis Park Public Schools. So while I hope to be able to answer most, if not all of your questions, there may be questions that you have this evening that we don't quite yet have answers for. But to start off, I would just like to take a few minutes to acknowledge the start that we've had in the midst of this pandemic. You know, one of the things that has been lost in all of this is that this past summer, we completed over $40 million worth of construction projects. And in a normal school year, that would be something that would certainly be receiving a lot of recognition and praise, because in normal conditions, it's very difficult to complete the type of projects that we completed during the summer months. And I continue to be thankful for our team here, led by Mr. Tom Bravo, and the contractors that we've worked with that have really collaborated to ensure that our staff could get back into classroom spaces this fall to educate our students. And specifically, we had and continue to have significant work occurring at our middle school. We had significant work occur at Susan Lindgren Elementary, Peter Hobart Elementary, at Central. Our early learning program has a completely new center there, and we had a couple $1 million worth of other deferred maintenance projects across the district. So I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that, as I know that has not been an easy task. And I also just want to, as we think about the start of the school year, I want to just take a moment to acknowledge and thank all of the volunteers, specifically our student volunteers. You know, this summer, as we started the school year, we had tremendous amount of support from our high school volunteers, NHS students who individually packaged thousands of masks here at the district office. And for those few days that they were here, it was probably some of the most exciting times I've had here in this district office since we've been here, because as they were packing the masks, they were certainly enjoying one another's company, singing songs, and really livening the mood here at the district office. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of our students who have volunteered to help make sure that we can get appropriate PPE to all of our students and staff. I also want to just take a moment to acknowledge, as we started this school year, that we've found different ways to engage our community. You know, for the first time, we introduced virtual town hall meetings, which was something that we've never done before, to engage our community and our public, and really to help update our families and students on the ever-evolving safe learning plan that we're implementing here. in St. Louis Park Public Schools. And one of the pieces that was a really important part to our staff here was having that opportunity to be in relationship with students and families. So although we're in the midst of a global pandemic, our staff, our leaders were really committed to finding safe ways to have in-person orientations with each family. So for the first couple of days of the school year, we did something different. We didn't jump right into learning. We really took the time to allow our staff to meet one-on-one with students and families to start to understand where the needs are and how we can assist our students in having an exceptional school year. In addition to that, at the start of the school year, we've spent a significant amount of time really trying to work to ensure that all of our families have the technology that they need to engage appropriately in a distance learning format. And we've, in response to the need, we've purchased several hundred more devices, and I'll be talking about this a little bit later, but as we've continued to learn more about the instructional needs of our students, particularly our youngest learners, we're going to be making a shift to iPads for students in grades K2, which was a large purchase that we've made this summer as well. And then lastly, we've gotten off to what I would consider a successful start to distance learning. And the reason that I'm classifying it as successful is that we've really tried to lean into the feedback that we've received from our parents, guardians, and students about their experience last spring in that emergency learning format and incorporate strategies and a process that was responsive to that so that our students and families have a better experience. And thus far, being a few days in, I would say primarily from our secondary families, I've received pretty positive feedback, and I would suggest from our elementary families that the feedback continues to be mixed, because although I know we're really working hard to meet the needs around the synchronous learning experience, when you have students at home, regardless of how much interaction and support there is from a teacher on a screen in front of them, there's a need sometimes for that parent or guardian or loved one at home to step in and help. And that continues to be a point of feedback that we receive about our current model in distance learning, particularly for our elementary school age children. On August, I believe it was August 3rd, we held a special meeting. And at that time, we held a meeting to share information about our recommendations for our safe learning plan. And at that point, the school board approved our recommendations to begin the year in distance learning and to allow us to have a transition period for E2 students to move to hybrid on September 28th, and for our students in grades 3 through 12, to move to hybrid on October 5th. And as a part of this, we made a recommendation to utilize a homeroom classroom teacher model, if you recall, which was really founded out of this belief that we wanted to create flexibility for students and families, meaning that if a family were to choose distance learning full time, we wanted to allow for students to come in and out of distance learning, and having this homeroom classroom teacher model afforded us that opportunity to do so. And then as part of this, as a requirement by the state, we wanted to ensure that every student or family that wanted distance learning had that choice. And something that I'll be talking about a little bit later, specifically as it relates to the homeroom classroom model, is some things that we've learned and some challenges that we've encountered since implementing this, and some potential redirection that we may be bringing back to the board at a later time. So as we've been thinking about our work, sometimes I think people believe that once we make a decision that, well, we've made that decision, we wipe our hands off and we put that decision on the shelf. And what I know that as a board, that each of you fully understand that really just making the decision is the easy part, right? And the hard work really begins once the decision is made, because once we've made that decision, we recognize how fluid the situation is. So we can't just rest and believe that that's the final the final word, and that we have to continue to be mindful of health and safety. And I'm going to go through each of these and just talk a little bit about the considerations that we've been making over the past several weeks with our leadership team, which is comprised of teachers, non-licensed staff, district level leaders, you know, facilities maintenance. We bring a group of people together at least once, if not twice every week, and spend 2 hours at a time really talking through all of the current data, either it be COVID cases per county data, or it be, you know, our staffing numbers, what it is that we, from a standard standpoint, we need students to know and be able to do, the type of training that's necessary for our staff to implement the different things that we need to implement. I talked a little bit a while ago about technology, making sure that we have enough devices to support. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that since making that decision on August 3rd, we've continually met and continually looked at our current reality with the hope of trying to get to this place, if all of these considerations align, that we can have students in person as much as possible, right? So one of the considerations that I mentioned was health and safety. And really within this health and safety consideration, there are several things that we look at. We look at the county and city level health data, which you'll see on the screen. And I'll just talk a little bit about that. What we've been noticing is promising, right? So, you know, maybe the mask mandate is helping, because it appears that in Hennepin County, at least, the data is flattening out. And in St. Louis Park in particular, we've seen a steady decline over the past several weeks, which is positive. But the piece that I think sometimes gets lost in all of this, I've been reflecting a lot on why is this the primary piece that people always hold on to. And I think it's because it's the primary reason that we're in the situation anyways, but it's also, I think it has a lot to do with the way when our governor communicated out to the public, like how school districts would make their decisions, that this was the primary focus. And what I want to share tonight is that certainly this is an important component, but this certainly is not the only thing that we have to take into consideration when we're making decisions about being able to transition in and out of educational delivery models. Another piece that we think about as it relates to health and safety is personal protective equipment, ensuring that we can meet the needs of our students and staff, and really, and you'll see here shortly, making sure that we can meet the needs from an accommodation standpoint. You know, as we've worked and tried to start looking at moving into the hybrid and or possibly in-person learning opportunities, our staff have asked for things that aren't a part of the overall PPE package that was provided to us by the state. So we have to then determine if we can meet those needs. I'll give you an example. You know, the state provided us face masks and masks, and we also provided here locally masks as well, but we had staff members that wanted goggles, right? So then we have to make a decision. Can we, you know, first and foremost, find those goggles? Do we have the resources to get those goggles? And how quickly can they get here so that we can meet that accommodation need? And I would suggest that there are, you know, hundreds of other accommodations that come up like that, right? So, and then, you know, ensuring that we can meet all of the safety protocols. And then with anything we do from a health and safety standpoint, you know, we're continually wanting to work with our consultant from Minnesota Department of Health and really thinking about every action that we take from that lens. So in thinking about what are these required health and safety practices, this should be familiar to you as we've looked at this previously, but the reason I wanted to come back to this graphic is because there is a distinction between what is required from a hybrid standpoint, which is the language that we've been using, and then what the expectations are from an in-person standpoint. And I want to call this out because a slide ago, we looked at the cases per county data. And if any of you are looking at this data like I look at every single day, what you'll notice is that right now, our data would suggest that at the elementary level, we could be in-person learning, right? So I want to just talk a little bit about what we've been thinking about. So what does that mean, right? So in-person learning, the distinction is that there's no longer this expectation or requirement of 6 feet social distancing, right? Because I think in the minds of a lot of our community members and stakeholders, there may be this belief that if we come back more in person at the elementary level, that we're still going to keep students 6 feet apart. And I just want to be clear about that. That's no longer a requirement. Now, certainly in environments where that's feasible, we'll do our best to keep students and staff spread out, but we know, but when you put more students in a building, it becomes more and more difficult to maintain that 6 feet distancing. And then there's those other pieces around 50% capacity of the facilities, and then the transportation piece. So if and when there comes a point in which we move to in-person learning, that these I'm confident, you know, as I think about our current enrollment and I think about our spaces, that I'm confident that we would not be able to, in every single situation, have students and staff 6 feet apart. We would not be able to ensure that our facilities were at 50% capacity, and we certainly would need to, fully utilize the buses that we have and fill those up and not keep those at 50% capacity. Now, the great thing is that we would continue to have an expectation of mask wearing in our buildings and on our campuses. We would certainly continue to provide PPE. We would continue to clean our facilities and make sure that we're really being intentional about cleaning high-touch surface areas, right? So there would certainly be things that would continue, but I really want to make sure that distinction is clear, because as our data continues to move in the right direction, the likelihood of going to in-person becomes higher, and I just don't want there to be any confusion around what that would look like. Because we've been talking a lot about hybrid and those expectations that are connected to that. So, we would continue all of these same key messages. We would continue practices around frequent hand washing, making sure that students are current on their shots. And certainly we're gonna continue to encourage people to stay home when they're sick or not feeling well. I'll just a quick story. Last week, and I appreciate this about our educators because they love our students so much and don't want to disappoint, that we had a staff member who wasn't feeling well and knew they weren't feeling well, but did not want to disappoint because they knew that families were expecting them to be online and being able to, facilitate learning, and did so while they were sick. And we just can't have that, right? Because if that staff member would have potentially been close to other staff members or potentially gotten other staff sick, then it leads down this long, path of trying to do contact tracing, which becomes very challenging at times. And what I have in front of you next is, and I don't plan on going through this because I would potentially give you a headache in trying to do so, but this is the decision tree that we've received from the Minnesota Department of Health. And essentially, this gives us different strategies that we should use regarding scenarios. The question that I hear oftentimes is, well, if one person contracts COVID at your school, does the whole school shut down, right? And my response is, it depends. And it really depends on a number of factors. So I share this to say that there's really no simple response or solution to those types of questions, but I want to assure each of you and our community that if or when that happens, we'll certainly be working with our Minnesota Department of Health consultant. We'll be following the direction and guidelines to do appropriate contact tracing to ensure that we are able to notify all appropriate people. And then from there, we have to make a determination on if that school can remain open or not, or is it just the classroom that's impacted, or is it just an individual person, right? So these are some of the considerations that we talk about daily here in the district as it relates to the health and safety of our students. And I would say, if not just as important, maybe even more important is our ability to safely cover our classrooms and spaces, right? So what we think about, what is our ability to appropriately and safely staff our schools? And the first thing that we always take into consideration in thinking about this is, anything we do, we have to do our best job at making sure we're not putting our colleagues, our staff in dangerous situations, right? So we think through that lens, we think about all of those safety considerations that we just talked about. And then we really think about, do we have enough people, right? Do we have enough people to staff the classes that we need to staff? So in St. Louis Park Public Schools, we have about 741 staff members. Of those 741 staff members, we had about 8% of those staff members notify us that they're not going to be able to come back this school year due to pre-existing health conditions or a pre-existing health condition of a family member. In addition to that, we had approximately 12% of our staff say, maybe I can come back, but I'm gonna need some accommodations, right? And I gave you an example of one earlier, which I would say is maybe one of our easier accommodations, something like goggles, but those accommodations also become much more challenging as well. And the piece from a staffing standpoint that we continue to work through is that the staffing needs, staffing accommodations, staffing pre-existing health conditions don't divide themselves evenly, right? So we have one school where we have 41 staff members that are like, hey, I'm not sure I can do this without accommodations, or I can't do it because of pre-existing health conditions, where we may have another school where we have 5, right? So all of these things play into our ability to change in and out of different educational delivery models. And it becomes even more complex when at the secondary level, when we have hard to fill licensure areas. I mean, we have one language area right now at one of our secondary schools where all of the people that teach that particular language right now are not sure that they can return, right? So when we have those type of situations, then we have to run through a number of different questions on, do we not offer the language, which that's problematic for me, right? Because we want to be able to provide students access to the language course that they want. Do we hire subs to fill that course and then try to have that teacher teach from a distance? Well, right now, one of the things that Patricia's going to talk to us about next at our next meeting is that from an enrollment standpoint, we're down about 120 students, and that equates to about $2 million, right, of lost revenue. So we're not at a point or place where we could be thinking about adding additional staff to help fill the gap when we need to make accommodations, right? So I share this not because I don't believe we can work it out, because I certainly do believe we can work it out, and I'm confident that we're going to figure out a plan to meet the needs of our students and continue to work towards getting our students back in person. But I share this because I don't ever want anyone to think that it's as simple as the COVID numbers are down based on the county rate data, so why aren't you in person, right? There's a number of factors that we're having to continually look at as we're making these decisions. Another piece that continues to stay at the center of all of our decision making is student learning, right? So the question that we ask ourselves is, what is our ability to deliver instruction that is aligned to grade level instructional goals? Like, are we able to deliver instruction safely that is getting students towards meeting standards? So as we've been working through this process, we've learned a few things, right? You know, we recognize based on the feedback that we've gotten that need for engaging live teaching experiences is something that we have to continue to do. One of the things that we talked about earlier this fall was that, hey, we want to be able to record. I'm sure some of you remember that language of recording complete lessons. Well, what we've learned over the past several weeks that when we record a lesson, that could be 50 minutes straight of a recording. Some of it's direct teaching, some of it's, students working in small groups, and that's not always the easiest thing for a student to go back to and try to sift through everything to get those key essential learning components. So what we're doing now is revising that to recapping the lesson. So what it's going to look like instead of it being a 50-minute lesson, it may look like 10, 15-minute chunks of direct instruction where students are able to more easily pick out the key learning, as opposed to sitting there and having to, go through an entire 50-minute recorded lesson. We continue to think about, and no matter what we do, what the opportunities for enrichment and intervention are, always considering social emotional learning and really wanting to be responsive to the feedback that we've gotten from families and students about creating a consistent schedule. We heard in the spring that, the uncertainty of what a student may be doing on any given day is problematic for students, first and foremost, and for families second. So no matter what we do, we want to create consistency in that educational delivery model in the schedule that we use. Another piece that we've had to continue to look at in all of this is staff preparedness, right? So what is our ability to effectively implement the educational delivery models, and how have we prepared our staff to do that? I think, Chair Tombeck, as you were introducing this, you kind of framed it as, how things are going and trying to lead in the middle of this pandemic. And I, earlier jokingly, you said to me, like, what classes did you have in superintendent school to learn how to lead through a pandemic? And I had none. In addition, our teachers, right? Our teachers and staff didn't have specific classes in educator school to learn how to teach and facilitate learning in 3 different modes, right? Right now, we're asking our teachers to be able to, when we shift to hybrid, to be able to educate students that are sitting right in front of them, those that are in distance learning, those that are in cohort C, and that's challenging and that's complex. And staff need to be prepared at a very high level to do that. Today, late this afternoon, I received a letter. The board chair and I received a letter from the Park Association of Teachers and our paraprofessional union, Spark, essentially requesting that we consider the implementation of a distance learning academy, right? So I'm going to say that one more time. We received a request to implement a distance learning academy prior to moving to any form of hybrid or in-person learning. And that request really was centered around this belief that at this point in time that our teachers don't have the capacity. And when I use the word capacity, I'm really thinking about three things. I'm thinking about knowledge and skill and will, right? So I don't believe based on the letter or any interaction that it's a will issue, because I think our teachers really care and they want to do what's best for kids, but they've not had the ability to strengthen their muscles around knowledge or skill in order to deliver instruction in front of with kids in front of them, and then kids virtually, and making sure all of those students are engaged at a high level. So what they're asking right now is that as we think about moving to in-person or hybrid, we're going to need to create a distance learning academy. And what's challenging about that is we built this entire model. If you remember how I started, we built this entire model on this classroom homeroom teacher model because we wanted to create flexibility for families, and we really wanted to center students in a relationship with a loving, caring adult at the elementary level, right? That classroom teacher, that no matter what model they were in, that they would have that same connection. And what this is now bringing up for us is that there may have to be, if we're unable to find a workable solution, there may have to be a shift in what we're doing as it relates to students who have opted into distance learning full time. So these are things that, you know, and I share that example just to share the complexity in all of this and how preparedness is an essential component in allowing us to implement the different educational delivery models. Something else that we continue to look at is technology, and I know that this is probably one of those pieces particularly connected to distance learning that is that we talk about often, right? So it's around access, it's around devices, and I'm thankful that you know our team has worked really hard to try to make sure that every student has what they need. I know that we have been really intentional in using our CARES dollars and coronavirus relief funds to try to make sure that we have the capacity from a technology standpoint. But something else that sometimes goes unthought about in all of this is just when you shift completely to you know, being online or using technology, although we've always had an internet acceptable use policy, now when you're always online, there are more and more issues that come up in education for students and staff about how they appropriately use these tools in a safe and productive manner. And at this point, we've probably distributed approximately 3,500 devices. But when it's all said and done, this fall, we'll probably have close to 200 hotspots out. And I mentioned earlier that we're looking at the shift from at the K2 level from Chromebooks to iPads based on just from a developmental and pedagogical standpoint. And then we ended up purchasing Zoom Classroom to allow greater functionality for our teachers to be able to do more small group learning, because at this point, Google Classroom does not have the capability. Now we know that Google will be adding these features next month, but like anything that's new, we're anticipating that there'll be many kinks that will need to be worked out, and we don't want our staff in an already complex time having to work through kinks in a new Google Classroom suite that has added functionality. From a school operational readiness standpoint, we look at this essential question of what our ability is to provide safe learning environments, transportation, and meal distribution. And you know, this is an area that I'm really thankful that I would say, and as I think about all of these considerations, this has continually been a consistent place that I think our staff has figured out ways to make sure that we're gonna make it work, right? So I'm appreciative of the fact that our staff is not allowing our facilities or the ability to get kids to school or being able to feed them as a reason why we can't do something that we need to do. So I'm thankful that in this consideration, generally, we're able to meet whatever needs are there so that we can move along the continuum to a different educational delivery model. And I would suggest as we move, actually, as we move more to an in-person model, some of these things in this area become easier because remember, when we're in person, we have different level of restrictions than we do in hybrid, right? So when we're in hybrid, I would say we're most challenged in this area, but when we're in person, the challenges aren't as great from a school operational readiness standpoint. From a, so just, and I won't spend time going through all of this, but there's distinctions around from a meal services standpoint, what that looks like when we're in person versus hybrid. Certainly I talked a little bit about this before, in either hybrid or in person, we're continually making sure that we're cleaning and we're practicing, we're doing everything we can to ensure students are practicing great hygiene by washing hands, covering coughs and sneezes, and wearing masks. And we're continuing to collaboratively work to create systems to keep high touch surface areas clean. At our meeting on August 3rd, we spent quite a bit of time talking about HVAC systems. So I won't go into great detail here, but I do want to just reiterate from that meeting on the 3rd that over the years on all of the deferred maintenance projects that we've really improved our ability to do airflow changes, which puts us in a good situation from a safety standpoint, at least as it relates to HVAC systems. Now, one of the pieces that I would like to highlight before I just share a few more key pieces of thinking that we have right now is that in order to be transparent in how we're thinking about this and communicating, for the remainder of this calendar year, our incident command team, which is the team I described earlier that's comprised of a wide, diverse group of staff, although we come together multiple times a week, we'll be really utilizing these dates that are listed here as kind of key consideration dates. And as you'll look at these dates, you'll notice that all of these coincide with the school board meeting, so that if there are decisions made around transitioning from one educational delivery model to the next, that we would bring that to the board on that subsequent board meeting date, and then look to potentially implement that change on the dates that you see listed here. And I would fully anticipate that as we get into the next calendar year, 2021, that we'll list out several dates similar to this, and we'll see how that process works. Now, we may try this for a couple of weeks and realize that this is not the best strategy. And I just ask that the board continue to provide us grace as we adjust and figure out how to best communicate with our community and ensure that we're doing everything we can to get students back as safely and as quickly as we possibly can. So as I close and then prepare to answer any questions that school board members may have, I just want to reiterate the fact that if it were as simple as just looking at the COVID cases per county data to make decisions, that certainly we would be shifting more quickly in and out of educational delivery models. But my hope this evening was to provide a greater level of context of all of the things that we're taking into consideration. I also want to just share as a message as I get ready to open it up for questions, that we certainly are committed to trying to create as many in-person learning opportunities, especially for our elementary school age children. We just believe that that's important. And now that the data is supportive of that, we want to figure out a way we can leverage it. But as I mentioned before, there are several other considerations around our ability to appropriately staff and the type of staff preparedness that we have in order to do that. But I want to share with the board this evening that that is something that we're looking at and trying to work towards here in the near future. And then lastly, I just want to share that there could be in the very near future, in the next couple of days, in a perfect world, I wanted to be prepared tonight to make a recommendation to the school board around a potential shift in the educational delivery model, but we're not there right now because we have to continue to work through these considerations. But I firmly believe in the next couple of days, there could be a request for a special meeting to come back together, as there may be some new information that we have around possibly shifting what we previously communicated regarding the E2 students starting in hybrid on September 28th, and our 312 students. There could be a shift. So I'm hoping this evening that as we open it up for questions, that you have some understanding and grace for that, and recognizing that we're going to do everything we can to bring students back in person safely and as quickly as we can, but not ever doing anything that's going to jeopardize our student or staff safety. So at this time, I'll take any questions that you may have.
Superintendent Osai, as we move into some Q&A, if I could just be super blunt and get really basic to make sure I understand what you're saying when you mentioned staffing considerations. What you're basically, is it true that what you are basically saying is we may not have enough teachers and staff who are comfortable coming into the building to actually even make in-person learning happen at some of our sites or some of our grade levels? Or
yes, at some of them. And in St. Louis Park here, we've used a strategy where our human resources department, they've called every single staff member and have engaged them in a conversation that have expressed concerns, either requesting accommodations or sharing that they have pre-existing medical conditions. So I would say, as I've talked to our Director of Human Resources, Rick Cryer, what he's shared with me, generally when he gets someone on the phone, the general theme is more so is fear, right? Some of our staff are fearful of returning to work just because of the current time that we're in. So yes, when we talk about staff coverage, that consideration is really about, can we have an adult in front of the students that are either in hybrid or in person? And Rick, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, or if there's something that I've missed or misrepresented.
No, Superintendent, you covered it well.
I also suspect, though, that there may be some fluidity even in those numbers that you mentioned, Superintendent Osai, about, you know, the people who said that they absolutely aren't necessarily comfortable coming in, or those people that would need accommodations. If we were to at some point announce a new plan or change dates or timelines or something, it's I imagine, Rick, if you please feel free to tell me I'm wrong, but those numbers may change one way or the other as plans solidify, right?
I believe so. And I think, you know, even as our Human Resources Department have been having conversations with staff based on our current educational delivery model, that those numbers have slightly shifted. So I would anticipate that a change in the model would elicit that type of shift as well.
Chair, members of the board, superintendent, yeah, in August, we started surveying staff about their comfort coming back. And, you know, do you think you need an accommodation? I think I can come back. I have no reserves. I think I can come back. I may need an accommodation. I don't think there's anything you can do, and I'm going to need, you know, I'm going to need to, or I won't, I don't believe I can come back and do my job in person. And so we, and that was about 8% of the staff of the people who responded. And I would say some of those people who said they weren't going to be able to come back, we've actually been able to accommodate them and get them comfortable to come back. I also think that as we're getting closer, it's more real, and some more people that did not respond, I'm not coming back, are now at a point where they don't believe they can come back. So the numbers are shifting, and we've asked staff for a deadline of this Friday. If you do not believe that you're able to come back to work as of September 28th or October 5th in person, when the kids come back in person, that you have to request a leave of absence by this Friday. And so we're going to start working through the real numbers should get real very soon.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much, Rick and Aston. Who has questions?
Chair Tumbeck, if I can also, I don't want to lose sight of this, so as Rick mentioned, we have 8% of our staff that are saying that they're unable to come back. In the grand scheme of things, certainly that presents a challenge for us, but every week I sit on calls with superintendents from all across the metro area. And as I sit on those calls, I hear my colleagues in other districts where they have 40% of their staff that are saying that they can't come back, right? So while 8% certainly presents a challenge for, little St. Louis Park, I fully recognize in the grand scheme of things that this is a very small number compared to what other school districts are facing around us here in the metro area.
Thank you for clarifying that. Okay. Yeah, Laura.
This is Laura. I have a question that's related to the staff coverage. So even if a licensed teacher takes a leave of absence and, allows the funding to be perhaps freed up, and I know that there's contract issues and stuff like that. I mean, aren't we currently in a teacher shortage issue? It's not like we have teachers lined up that are licensed and highly qualified to necessarily fill these jobs. And I know that you had mentioned we're already having issues with a language at the secondary level. And so I can't imagine that we have licensed subs or people to fill in for a year for these positions for teachers that aren't comfortable coming back.
So the answer to that is it depends. Now, we've been working very closely with Teachers on Call. We have 377 teacher substitutes who are active in the system. And if you asked me, do I think I could fill a bunch of elementary licensed positions, I'd say yes. If you asked me, do I think I could fill a bunch of special education EBD positions, I'd say no. High-level language jobs, chemistry, senior math, some of those jobs would be very difficult. Clinical psychologists, those kind of jobs would be very difficult in the hard-to-fill license areas.
I have one, Mary.
Sure, Karen.
So as we talk about the numbers and changing from hybrid to in-person based on the numbers, at what point is the board going to hold a special meeting to get ourselves out of Zoom meetings so that we are meeting in person? And I'd like to hear where my colleagues are at with that question.
I can I'll start as chair as setting the agenda and whether we put that on the agenda. I can make the argument both ways on this. I could say easily that if we're going to put any of our students and our staff back in our buildings, then we should be willing or comfortable to go back too. And if we're not personally comfortable, absent some specific issue, then we should be going back. On the other hand, I can also argue that the whole point of all of these guidelines and safety procedures is to minimize that which is not necessary. And we are functioning perfectly capably in this Zoom setup very well. And it is not necessary. And there's no, I don't know that there's not like the pedagogical reason for us to have to be in person together. And so we would be minimizing the risk to others by keeping ourselves and our germs out of the buildings. This is the lawyer in me that can make both sides of this argument. And so I would just say that I would ask all of you to think about that before our next meeting and kind of where you fall on that, those two views. But that I can completely understand the necessity to raise that and make our own decisions about what we think is best. So
Mary, you make a good point. Yep, Mary, you make a good point. and very persuasive. So I have a question, and it's kind of changing the direction of the conversation, but it's still in regards to this. So it's more in regards to devices and or ability for people to do distant learning. All people do distance learning. In spite of all of the pre-work that we've done and all the extra understanding who needs and what needs are there, we probably are still missing a handful of people, right? I'm wondering, is there a path for them to get access? Why I'm asking is I was at a dinner party last night, and COVID safe, and it came up, and they're wondering, this person has 9 kids in the system, and throughout the elementary all the way through high school, and they can't deal with one hotspot in a household with trying to learn. So I was wondering, do we have an opportunity or a pathway for those type of families to also get this distance learning?
Thank you for the question. And yes, we do. We have so to your first point that you made, I too believe, although we've worked really hard, that there still are certainly either families that we haven't heard from or families that maybe have, as you've described, Director Morrison, several children in the home, and they have one hotspot, and that hotspot's not meeting their needs. So yes, we have a pathway for access to more technology. We have a technology request form that every student or family can fill out and just really request what they need. And we continue to order more hotspots, more devices as those needs arrive. And I know that both Director Duffy and Director Marble can also add more to that if there's anything that I've missed.
Yes, this is Tom Marble. I just wanted to follow up. One of the challenges we've had is getting our hands on some of this equipment and the availability of it. I have 50 more hotspots coming in tomorrow to meet needs that still exist at Peter Hobart, Susan Lindgren, and Aquila. And since I've ordered those, additional needs have been popping up. So we've been working with our media specialists at the schools to try to be the collection point for this information and get this information to us, to me, as quickly as they can, so that we can get orders in and try to get our hands on things. We're running into challenges where the model of hotspot that we purchased and distributed are no longer available anymore. So now we're getting new ones in. We're having to create new instructions for families because it's not the same device that we handed out to people previously. So there's supply chain things we're running into to try to get devices to them, but we're working to get those things in as soon as we're identified the need, and try to get them in here as soon as we possibly can.
Thank you. And I fully understand the supply chain challenges that the whole world is in today. I was wondering, given that there are supply chain challenges with that one resource, is it possible to use a different resource? And I'm saying, is it possible for us to use maybe in CenturyLink and purchase a service there and work with them on getting services to some households so they have a more robust internet service?
It's an interesting question of whether we're able to buy service that would be connected directly to another residence, and I think there's some legalities and challenges there. We are directing families to resources that are out there that other internet service providers that would connect directly to their residences have, in terms of low cost, which actually would be a better solution than what we're providing them in terms of hotspots, because of course hotspots are based on mobile cellular technology and don't work everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, depending upon where you're at inside a building, you may get signal, you may not. So, you know, in the case of a household where we've got multiple students, you know, working with them to direct them to low-cost internet provider program through like Comcast or CenturyLink is probably, if it works for them and they can get that service there, is probably a better option than us providing them a hotspot.
Sure.
Tom, I'm wondering too if we could be having further conversations with the city, and if we can be talking to the city again about partnering with us to provide or to ensure Wi-Fi access at some of these homes, because we do know that it would benefit, you know, the entire family or the entire household, and would improve access to all sorts of services. So I've got that on my to-do list, is to follow up with you and Superintendent Osai about continuing conversations with the city along those lines, if you think that could go anywhere.
Yes, we did have conversations with them last spring, trying to find some synergy between locations in the city where they might have access. I know, I just learned today that it sounds like they have a program going on at the rec center where they're having open Wi-Fi and space for socially distancing for families or students to come in and use that space as well. So yeah, it's definitely, and they're more than willing to partner with us in any way, shape, or form that they can. We just, you know, didn't find, you know, a way to cover certain areas of the district or the city based upon where infrastructure currently is across the city. So, but yeah, we definitely keep that channel open and can continue to talk with them.
Thank you.
Chair Tom Beck, can I share something as it relates? You know, earlier in the presentation, I referenced a request that we received from the Park Association of Teachers and Spark, our paraprofessional union, to consider a distance learning academy. And I kind of explained how that would be a shift from what our current model looks like. One of the pieces that I want to highlight, because I think it's something that, because it was a request, that we should look into and think about what that would mean. But you know, there certainly are implications with that. And I'll just give you an example from an elementary standpoint, what that looks like across the district at each grade level. So right now we have 44 kindergartners who have requested full distance learning, 63 first graders, 51 second graders, 45 third graders, 44 fourth graders, and 53 fifth graders. Now, if we were looking at a district-wide distance learning academy, I could see us being able to have students from all of our elementary schools be a part of the distance learning academy, because at first grade with 44 students, that's 2 sections, right? You know, third grade, that's probably 3 sections, and it works, it could work out. Where in St. Louis Park, it becomes challenging is that we have an immersion school, right? And what the challenges are with the immersion school is that we have IB schools and an immersion school, and trying to combine all of those schools together would be complicated, because we would not be able to fully either uplift PYP values or the immersion values, right? So what has to happen now as we explore this Distance Learning Academy, we have to consider from an immersion standpoint, how do we support those students' needs, right? Now, as we look at PSI, what does that mean? Well, they have 61 total kids, but they have 10 kindergartners. 10 kindergartners does not warrant a full section of Distance Learning Academy FTE, right? That would be irresponsible of us to have a full section, right? They have 10 first graders. 10 first graders does not warrant a full section of distance learning first grade, right? They have 8 second graders. They have 9 third graders, 12 fourth graders, 12 fifth graders. So, you know, I'm talking out loud right now, and sometimes that's dangerous. So what I want to say is that by sharing these different considerations, by no means am I suggesting that this is what we're going to do or what we're not going to do, right? So I'm going to say that one more time. Right now, I'm talking out loud, and I'm just trying to elevate the different considerations that go into these type of decisions. So as I share this, this does not mean that this is what we're going to do, right? But, you know, it could look like that we could ask PSI families that if they want full-time distance learning, would they consider, right, joining a district-wide distance learning cohort and being a part of that? Now, I don't know what that's going to mean from an immersion language development at those grade levels during this time. It could also look like that we do mixed grade level distance learning at PSI, right? What if we had a K1 section, a 2, 3? So I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that as we think about all of the different scenarios and options, that we're going to have to really get creative as we work to move students more towards in-person, and as we work to meet the request of PAT and Spark, right? There's no quick fix solution to any of this.
Thank you for explaining that in more detail, to just be really specific about what the challenges are there. I think there's no question that there would be challenges in creation of this academy, but I completely understand where Park Association of Teachers and Spark are coming from, because we have 2 teachers on the board. My mom is a teacher. She's been teaching in a distance model, transitioning to hybrid shortly, and talking about the challenges. So trying to talk to your students in front of you and not lose your students on the camera, and be mindful of the students who may have to be watching later. To your point, Superintendent Osai, from earlier about kind of how we're rejiggering the videos a little bit. I can totally empathize with those challenges and how that just doesn't feel tenable or sustainable. And I will be the first to kind of admit, as we're continuing to explore this and implement this and live this, hybrid seems like one of the most challenging options, right? You know, in person, I question how, I'm questioning more and more what we gain from a hybrid model versus a careful, well thought out in-person model, and then a continuation of distance. So I totally understand and appreciate all of the questions and challenges and suggestions that everybody's working through right now. Who has more questions? Anne.
I have I guess it's a request. I have some major concerns about this, the idea of a distance learning academy, given that what we have said from the beginning is that community building and relationship building and this homeroom classroom model is one of the reasons why this is going to work in St. Louis Park better than it did last spring. And I have seen some amazing community building and relationship building coming out of my 2 kids' schools in the last couple of weeks. Parent engagement and the one-on-one meetings with homeroom teachers, and then just seeing what's been happening in every class every day since last week. So my request is, if this is something that we want to be on the table, we need to hear about how that relationship building aspect gets compensated for if we're changing kids' classrooms 3 weeks or 4 weeks into the school year. And I think that it might change people's minds about whether they want their kids, people who are sort of on the fence on distance learning, whether or not they want to continue to choose distance learning. So I think we need to think about how we communicate this and how we run the math. we might see some changes, and I think we want to be able to accommodate that. So we need to run the math with knowing that the numbers might change. So I guess that's a request for if we hear this again. But those are 2 things that I will say I need to hear.
Yeah, and so I thank you, Vice Chair Casey, for that request. And what I heard you say is, you know, recognizing that we really framed our current classroom homeroom teacher model around this, A, flexibility for families, but B, the relationship piece of having that homeroom classroom teacher. So knowing that that relationship piece was central to what we designed, how, if there is a shift, will that be maintained? Because we would potentially have students, to your point, that have now spent 3 weeks with a particular grade level teacher that now, if they remain in a distance learning academy model, would have to have a new teacher. So how will those relationships be developed and established in the same way that you have observed with your children over the past couple of weeks? And I appreciate that. And certainly if there is any form of recommendation connected to this moving forward, that will be something that will be addressed. But I want to reiterate that there have not been any decisions made in that manner, and that this is really just trying to surface all of the different considerations and implications that are a part of this process right now.
I appreciate that, thanks. And I definitely am not requesting that right now. I get it, thanks.
Mary, a couple of comments here. One being that I do appreciate the superintendent's sort of enthusiasm during this presentation, because it is difficult stuff, and I can see that it's probably some of why you're a superintendent, is because this is the work that drives you. But I also understand that it's pretty complicated, and that's what we were hearing tonight. And I think part of that, what you were underlying saying was to the question that comes up from parents sometimes: what about this district? Why are they doing this? You know, why are they able to do this? They have people doing this. They're going to hybrid already. And I think you were sort of hinting at that, you know, it's different here in St. Louis Park by design, by the way that we've set up our teachers for instruction, by our anti-racist policies, by all sorts of things that we do. And so we have to take all of those things into consideration. So I really do appreciate that. It's a really meaningful sort of thinking here that's going on, and that it isn't simply about what do people feel at this moment, or what are we seeing in other communities. And I'm sure we're learning, as you said, you're talking to other districts and learning from what they're doing, and you all are in conversation. And I'm sure there's both pluses and minuses that they're sharing, both positive and negative stories that they're sharing. So thank you for that. And so I just wanted to say again, I just really appreciate that hard work, and sort of to speak to that idea that as we communicate to parents, how important that might be, in sort of the right kind of prideful way of saying, you know, we are St. Louis Park, we are doing it different. We are doing it because this is why. And that might be important for parents to continue to hear. And then I just had one piece of feedback too, as sort of like ties into that. As we do continue to talk about evolution of things in some of those conversations and things like town hall meetings, I think those are really great. I did participate in the middle school town hall meeting. And I think, as you know, I was sort of disappointed that that was not promoted as well as it could have been in terms of a conversation. But just encourage that we continue to have those outlets for parents to ask those questions, to understand why we're doing it this way or whatever, and just getting some of the honest feedback and direct communications from people. So that's it.
Thank you, Director Cox.
Since there's quiet time, I did also join that town hall, and it was difficult to join it. So if we can look into making it a little easier for us non-computer savvy people.
There are plenty of non-computer savvy people, and sometimes even when we're computer savvy, the computers don't cooperate, as we learned tonight.
Yes,
So,
we know.
yes. Heather, did you have anything?
No, I think you all have covered it. Thank you.
I do have one more thing. I'm sure I have 17,000 more things, but for right now, my next thing is, as we're continuing to evaluate next steps, Superintendent Osai, I appreciated your articulating the value that we really do want our students back, in the classroom as much as possible. And so one of the things that I'm experiencing in our house as an elementary parent, but then I have also heard from folks who have reached out to the board Could we talk a little bit more about what the considerations are for bringing the elementary day back to its full day schedule as opposed to the abbreviated schedule that was mentioned or that we've started with?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Chair Tombeck. And so I'm not sure that this evening I will be able to fully answer the question, but I can maybe share some of the considerations that went into the current half, well, and it's probably a little more than half day, but the current half day schedule. And I fully believe that that schedule, and taking into consideration from a hybrid standpoint, what the expectations are around social distancing and capacity and other pieces, recognizing that lunch and recess are, two times of the day where really meeting those social distancing requirements or expectations become problematic from a hybrid standpoint. Like if we go back to, that hybrid, those hybrid expectations and all of the things that we were needing to be able to do. I guess we've not yet had conversation about what it could look like if we were more in person, recognizing that the in-person requirements are different. So that certainly will be something that we as a team will need to discuss over the coming days.
I would be very hopeful that we could be really seriously considering how we can maximize our elementary students' full day. It seems like there's, I would like to hear more, I guess maybe is the other way of putting that, about why we need to do the half day, if that's what the elementary leadership is recommending. I feel like maybe I would like to understand a little bit better about why that's necessary, or what we could be doing to return them. And I am thinking about also what happens if the elementary sites stay at a half day and we have hybrid for the secondary grades. Do we run into childcare issues for families if their elementary students are getting home before their older brothers and sisters are that day, on the same day if they're all going to school? I think that that's just another challenge we're gonna be presenting families with if we're staggering the day like that. And I will totally admit that I am having a really hard time figuring out, I've got 3 kids and they've got 3 different schedules, and I really don't know when my 5th grader is doing specials in the afternoon and when she's not. Karen, help me out here. Do you feel the same way? Like, when are we doing, and is gym gonna be a synchronous activity, or is Spanish gonna be asynchronous? And I mean, that kind of afternoon is just, I'm an English speaker and relatively intelligent, and I'm having a hard time keeping up with what happens in the afternoons.
Because we haven't received a lot of useful information about it yet, to be honest. And my understanding was we're going to kind of ease into this and then ramp it up. But yes, that there is an expectation that there's some kind of specialist time Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, because we as families still have not heard how we engage with the Wednesday small group requirements, IEP fulfillment, other service fulfillment. So it's still a work in progress. And I think this is the part where we're asking for the grace, right? To be patient with each other and the system. So I'm trying to stay on top of what my 2 kids need to be doing. But yeah, my 7th grader is on a screen a whole lot longer than my 5th grader. And we opted not to go into Kids Place, wanting to save an essential worker spot, if you will, because of community needs. But I need help getting more of his time filled up, especially when winter hits and biking around with the kid in the neighborhood isn't going to be the option for the de facto Phi Ed class. Anybody else on the board have elementary kids? I think it's just you and me.
Yeah, and we have 5th graders, and we're looking at the fact that they're going to the middle school next year. And so to Karen's point about just the needs are just so different between what, you know, our incoming kindergartners who are on their 3rd day of school and our 5th graders. And I totally understand how this is just echoing everything you've been talking about, Superintendent Osai, about all of the myriad challenges into how to do this.
And back to the issues related to in-person is going to be easier. Well, yes, but limiting non-essential or discontinue large gatherings. So how do we, are we in person at 50% or are we in person 100% minus our distance cohort that chose distance? Because to have 500 kids in a building and lunchtime and recess and timing, how do you get, I just don't see how you get the lunchroom cleaned for all the kids. Do you see what I mean? My brain is not grasping how you discontinue large gatherings and activities that do not allow for social distancing and have in person going on. So am I missing a key detail about what goes on with in-person versus hybrid? Because when I heard the discussion of in-person, my brain immediately went back to, oh wow, that's really kind of what we used to normally do. But I don't think that that's quite accurate. So if you can get my brain moving in the right direction, this would be a good time.
Yeah, so I don't think that you are, I think you're certainly in alignment with what is suggesting. So which is why, you know, things like lunch, recess, assemblies, other times where we're bringing, you know, larger cohorts of students together and we can't appropriately social distance them, that becomes problematic. And I do believe that, you know, that was part of why this half day or 3/4 day of a schedule was developed to get around some of the challenges that occur when you have like lunch and recess and other times of the day where there are large groups of students congregating in particular areas of the building. But that certainly would be something that if we were to move to in person, we would have to kind of re-envision, how do we do lunch? How do we, you know, how are we doing recess? And there certainly are staffing implications that come up with that, because at a lot of our sites, there are a couple of people that we have doing, you know, recess, and we have a few people that are cafeteria supervisors, right? So it's going to require us to really think about how we're utilizing all of the space at our sites differently to feed students, and how we're utilizing spaces at our sites to allow students to get the developmental needs met around recess and socialization from that standpoint as well.
No easy answers.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, at this point, I would pay greatly for some easy answers and some wins. Enough money in the world to find those right now. So.
Oh, I think when it's all said and done, we're going to be paying and paying and paying and have a bigger hole related to how school financing is already a problem. So, and I'm expecting you and Patricia are going to have a pretty detailed update on what the finances are looking like once the enrollment. When I heard 120 down, that made me swallow hard. So thank you.
And that will be next at our next meeting. We plan on providing an update on where we currently are and some projections moving forward.
All right.
I had one more question.
Okay, go ahead, Ken.
And this one, it's changing subject a little bit more, but still in the same subject. So on the current model, distance learning, is it the practice to have some classrooms would meet every day? I'm asking because my kid has, and a couple of our friends has, some teachers that are trying to meet every day, and that doesn't really lend that time for those open periods to get some of that other work done. So
my high schoolers are having the same experience. They're having to do check-ins in some classes every day.
Okay.
If not the whole class period necessarily, but at least a check-in.
A check-in and possibly half the period or something. Okay, so that's going to be normal.
Patrick, I can't see your face with your. Does that make sense to what you're thinking, or is that? Oh, we can't hear you.
Oh,
now we can. Now we can.
Okay. My understanding is that they have opportunities, although the teacher is available all week, that they aren't necessarily offering new lessons every day throughout the week, that sometimes during the week they're there for check-ins, and that there are synchronous lessons on odd days and even days during the weeks. So when you say that your child has class every day, I think they have the choice to check in with their teacher every day.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, if there's no other questions, we can move on. And of course, Superintendent Osai, we will be available if we need to have a special meeting or gather sooner than I think we're next scheduled for the 29th. Tuesday. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So next up, we have the summary of the superintendent evaluation that Vice Chair Ann Casey will lead us in or talk about.
Thank you, Chair Tomback. Something just happened on my computer, so here it came back.
Perfect. All right.
I think. Okay. So the board met in a closed meeting on August 17th, 2020 to discuss the annual superintendent evaluation pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05 subdivision 3A. I'll read that. A public body may close a meeting to evaluate the performance of an individual who is subject to its authority. The public body shall identify the individual to be evaluated prior to closing a meeting. At its next open meeting, the public body shall summarize its conclusions regarding the evaluation. A meeting must be open at the request of the individual who is the subject of the meeting. So Superintendent Osai did not request for the meeting to be open, so the meeting was closed and all board members were in attendance. Now today is the next open meeting of the board, so the purpose of this report is to summarize that evaluation that was created by the board during that meeting. The superintendent was evaluated in 5 performance areas and 3 goal-oriented areas. The performance areas were relationships with the Board of Education, fiscal management, community and public relations, effective leadership of staff, management of central office, and professional skills and abilities. The superintendent met or exceeded expectations in all but one of these areas, with strengths including aligning decisions with the core values of the district, sharing the process for decision-making with the board, the ability to take on difficult conversations and truly hear other perspectives, and willingness to center the humanity of students and staff. The one area of concern is in holding all leaders accountable for student outcomes in accordance with our mission. The superintendent has made great progress and in the right direction, but our student achievement and community engagement goals have not been met system-wide. It's worth noting that these student achievement and community engagement goals are incredibly and appropriately ambitious. And when Superintendent Osai has met these goals, he will have achieved what educational leaders all over the country are striving toward. This is to say that we don't hold it against Superintendent Osai that these goals have not been met. They're systemic goals. And as a board, we are actually considering alternatives for how to rate performance in this area going forward. The goals that we used in the evaluation are taken directly from the annual goals of the strategic plan in the areas of teaching and learning, structures and systems, community collaboration, and facilities. In all of these areas, the superintendent met or exceeded the goals. In teaching and learning, the superintendent's leadership led to important work by the learning design teams. And in the area of data assessment and research, you saw some of that work earlier tonight. And progress in the area of multi-tiered systems of support for student behavior. In structures and systems, the new budget process has increased clarity and transparency, and we appreciate prioritizing spending to align with racial equity goals and the district's core values and strategic plan. And the Finance Advisory Committee has been expanded to include multiple perspectives on budget considerations. In community collaboration, the superintendent led an effort to connect with families in our community and increase attendance by residents of St. Louis Park going into kindergarten. And in facilities, the superintendent effectively oversaw facility improvements and the start time processes, both complex and incredibly complicated projects that have gone very smoothly despite potential challenges. And he has been an excellent steward of the resources the community voted to give the district for facility improvements. Overall, I don't think the board could be more thrilled or supportive of our superintendent. We used a new process this year for our superintendent evaluation, and I think I was really pleased by how well it went, but I do think that we will make some improvements on how and what to evaluate going forward. So I will work with the superintendent to make some suggested changes to the tool, and we'll bring that to the board this fall so that we're all on the same page going into the next review cycle. And just the last thing I want to say is that this review was for the 2019-2020 school year, but obviously took place during the prep and lead up to this, what were the words you said, unprecedented, surreal 2020-2021 school year. And this is some of the hardest work that Aston and every single staff member in our district has ever had to do. And we're just incredibly grateful for and inspired by your leadership always, and especially now. So I don't know if anyone has any questions about the process or the evaluation. The summary that I gave, the words came directly from the evaluation that the board created together as a collaborative document. So.
I think that summed it up pretty well.
All right. Thank you for everything, Aston.
Chair Tomback, Vice Chair Casey, may I say something?
Please do.
I just want to, first and foremost, thank you for the feedback, but more importantly, I would like to thank the entire board that as we've gone through this process, none of the information contained in my performance appraisal or that was shared this evening was new information to me. And I think that as a leader, it's so important that, you know, I am aware of the challenges and the concerns that you all have as a board as they are happening so that I'm able to respond accordingly. And I just want to acknowledge the area in which I didn't meet. I'm just like any student, right? You say a bunch of positive things, and the only thing that I can take away from the conversation is the place where I've been deficient in my leadership. And I could not agree more that student achievement, I've not yet led successfully enough in this district. I've not yet influenced the hearts and minds and behaviors and actions of our staff in a manner that has led to improved student achievement. And also we've not engaged our community, our diverse community in the manner that we need to in order to meet those very rigorous achievement goals. So the accountability that you are setting for me, I want to just be very clear that accountability that's the accountability that I will have and will continue to have and increase the accountability for our entire system, because as a leader of an educational institution, if our main goal is around educating students and that's not happening, quite frankly, it's unacceptable. and I'm ultimately responsible. And I just want you all to hear me say that I will do everything within my power and legally acceptable to change these outcomes. So thank you for the transparency and your feedback, and as I've continued to say, the responsibility to hold myself and my colleagues accountable for changing outcomes for students. So thank you.
I'll just say that it's that integrity and compassion and commitment and dedication that makes us, number one, want to change that whole rubric so that we don't have to, put anything negative on there in this respect, because we understand what we're asking of you. And we also see everything you're doing to make that happen. And this is not a switch that can be flipped. This is it's not even a marathon. I don't know what it is. It's something that not everybody's figured out how to do yet. And we're making steps as we go. So I'm grateful that you're the one who's in this position right now working to do this.
No, I appreciate that. And it's very clear to me what it is. And it's not anything different. So our schools are just a microcosm of the larger society that they exist in. And the same systemic, racism that exists in our larger society impacts us here in St. Louis Park, right? So I as I always say, if I'm going to do this job in the state of Minnesota, this is the place that I want to do it, because of the leadership of the school board and the responsibility and permission that I have to show up as close to my authentic self as possible, and to be able to talk about race and hold people accountable for things that don't contribute to the creation of an anti-racist school district. So I completely get it. I support it. And I'm thankful that this is part of this process, because it only energizes me more to double down on our efforts and to, make sure that if you're in this organization and you're working on and you're receiving a check from St. Louis Park Public Schools, that you're doing it in the most racially conscious way that you can, and in a manner that's going to improve outcomes for each and every student. So thank you for the feedback, and we'll continue to be working diligently in this area.
Anybody else have anything they want to add?
Thank you for your leadership. It's exceptional.
All right. Well, I am very mindful that it is 10:15. So I'm going to guide us through the rest of this as efficiently as I can. Policy development, first reading, 522, student sex non-discrimination. Rick Cryer, Director of Human Resources, is going to talk to us about this one.
Isn't that what everybody wants to talk about at 10:15 p.m.?
Changes in Title IX? Absolutely.
Yeah. So just at a very high level, the federal government changed some requirements under Title IX that affect school districts and college and university systems. This expressed goal is to create better enforcement around preventing sexual discrimination in educational organizations, whether it's pre-K-12 or higher ed. Some of the things they did required us to have a separation of Title IX officers, so that there were people who were the Title IX coordinator, an investigator, a decision maker, and someone then to appeal to. There were some other requirements that then the Minnesota School Board Association recommended to school boards to adopt as a model upgrade to their 522 policy. And we took those recommendations, and as we had done before with the 522 policy on sexual harassment prevention, we created a policy and a procedure statement. And what's before you tonight brings us into compliance with the new requirements under Title IX. We have always had a sexual harassment prevention policy, and we've always investigated quickly and took swift and appropriate action. This just updates it to some of the technical requirements of the new law.
So the language in this is pretty statutory, and there's not a lot that we're going to want to change from the model policy, right?
You know, there are some flavoring things that if you wish to change, you could, but yeah, there are some requirements that we must have those officers, and we must name the Title IX coordinator, and so there's some things that we must do, and and then there's then like anything else, there's a lot of other words that end up in there, but there are some certain things that we have to do. And quite frankly, many of them we want to do. I would say the one greatest thing is I would say there are more rights under this policy afforded to the person who has been charged or alleged to have done the sexual harassment, is alleged to have done that, than have been under other policies. So I think that was, I would say, another change that came out, that you must have a grievance procedure, you must have this, you must have that.
Okay, thank you very much, Rick. In situations like this where there's statutory language and statutory requirements, we generally do tend to just follow MSBA's model policies, which is what's here. So with that in mind, does anybody have any particular comments or questions about this policy at this time?
I have one.
Chair Tom, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Karen. Karen?
I thought Ann was going to go.
Oh.
I'll go after Ann.
Okay. I just wanted to say that I recommended that this come to a first reading without going through the policy committee, just because all of that statutory language was there. But if we want to send it to the policy committee for review between now and our second reading, we can certainly do that.
Karen?
It's just a tiny typo under 2D. Every school district employee too shall be responsible. Do we need the "to" in between the employee and the "shall"? Or if it's "to," it should be "TOO," not "TO." I'm being super.
No.
No.
I think again that's a good catch, and we'll take a look at that to see what was meant there.
Thank you.
Otherwise, I don't see the need to have it brought to the policy review committee. Does anybody have any objections?
No objections.
Okay, great. Then we'll see that one at our next meeting for a second reading. Policy development, second reading, 536 gender inclusion and 808 COVID face covering. Ann.
So the policy review committee did review the gender inclusion policy over the summer, along with a couple of other policies, and added not too many things. I think we had a first reading, we had a conversation about the language about the legitimate pedagogical tool. So we added a little bit of language there, just to say that it would have to also align with the purpose of this policy if students were separated by gender. And then we added language about intersectionality in the general statement of policy as well. And in the terminology, we added language acknowledging that the terminology itself can be varied or different between cultures, and that every effort should be made to use terms that honor an individual's identity, whether or not those are like explicitly spelled out in the policy. And then I think the last piece was just to really strengthen the reporting procedures, so that we know that students are to be made aware of reporting procedures, and that staff know what the reporting procedures are as well. I think that was something that we heard from students, in fact. So I think that pretty much sums up the blue changes. I don't know if Laura or Heather has anything to add.
No, I think that sums it up very well. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you for the three of you on making these changes. I think they strengthen the policy a lot. I love the changes. Anybody else? All right, great. What's the COVID face covering?
Superintendent Osai, do you want to take this one? I think you're muted.
Yeah, so with the face covering policy, this has been something that has come up several times over the course of the past several weeks, and primarily from this standpoint, from staff really wanting to better understand what, kind of essentially what's going to happen if a student doesn't, have their face covering on. So what we've attempted to do in this draft of the face covering policy is really to provide, first and foremost, a high-level overview of what different acceptable, face coverings are. And you'll see that there have been some additions, for example, like a transparent face mask, and that was added specifically for students who maybe have, certain audio issues or hearing issues, to be able to read lips and be able to see the adult or person that they're talking to more clearly. And what we've also tried to do in this particular case is in the policy, as it relates to enforcement of the policy, really try to highlight the need for education of students who may not be in compliance or who may wear the face mask incorrectly, to really start off from this place of working through a restorative practices type of framework and trying to help that student understand what they've done and how that potentially has caused harm to the community, but then also to make sure that if it becomes a repeat offense, that the education or the enforcement of that becomes progressive in nature, and just really adhering to what we have in policy 506. And what's important about that is that as our policy committee has been working on and reviewing policy 506, that they've really worked to come up with a model or draft that's restorative in nature. So what would ultimately happen is that this is at the foundation of enforcement is going to be a lot of education and support of students, as opposed to a frame of policing students around masks and suspending kids around masks, so on and so forth. Now, certainly we don't want a situation where a kid continually violates that, but we don't want to start in this place of removal of students. And I think there was language in the NSBA draft policy that very explicitly stated the removal of students from the school facility. And I just don't believe in St. Louis Park that that's where we want to start. I think we want to start around education, and then if necessary, we certainly can progress, but to be more restorative in our initial response. So I think I'll just stop there and answer any questions. But as you can see, there have been several additions, and a lot of what we've added, I've been in communication with other superintendents across the metro, and one of the school districts, Richfield, to the south of us, I really appreciated kind of some of their framing, and I took a lot of what is here from what Richfield has developed.
Thank you, Aston. Does anybody have any questions about this? Questions or comments?
My only comment is I appreciate the work that you guys did on that to make it more a better policy.
I was going to say the same. I know I brought up that question about the enforcement at our first reading, and this is fantastic work and absolutely satisfies my concern.
Mine too. Okay, great. Hearing nothing else, we're moving on to the consent agenda. Would anyone like to pull anything off of the consent agenda this evening? Seeing no hands, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I so move. This is Ann.
I'll second that. This is Ken.
Thank you. Laura?
Mary Tomback,
Aye.
Ann Casey,
Aye.
Ken Morrison,
Aye.
Karen Waters,
Aye.
Colin Cox,
Aye.
Heather Wilsey,
Aye.
Laura McClendon, aye.
Passes 7-0. Thank you. On the action agenda, first up, it is recommended that the school board approve the resolution to designate Superintendent Aston Osai as the identified official with authority and Flower Kutrina as the identified official with authority to add and remove names only for the MDE External User Access Recertification System. The Minnesota Department of Education requires that school districts annually designate an identified official with authority to comply with the MNIT Enterprise Identity and Access Management Standard, which states that all user access rights to Minnesota state systems must be reviewed and recertified at least annually. The identified official with authority will assign job duties and authorize external users access to MDE secure systems for their local education agency. The board recommends to authorize Superintendent Aston Osai to act as the identified official with authority and Flower Kutrina to act as the identified official with authority to add and remove names only for St. Louis Park Public Schools District 283. Flower, did I do that right?
Fantastic. Perfect. 10 out of 10.
That's great. Somebody should move.
Karen moves.
Karen moves.
Colin will second.
Colin seconds. Thank you. Laura?
Okay. Mary Tomback,
Aye.
Ann Casey,
Aye.
Ken Morrison,
Aye.
Karen Waters,
Aye.
Colin Cox,
Aye.
Heather Wilsey,
Aye.
Laura McClendon, aye.
Passes 7-0. Next up, Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee reappointments. It is recommended that the school board approve the reappointments of George Falkus. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. George, please forgive me if I mess that up. And Peter May to serve on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission for the City of St. Louis Park for a 3-year term ending May 31st, 2023. Just as a reminder that the school board has the opportunity to appoint certain individuals as its representatives on some of the city commissions, and including Parks and Recreation Commission, Advisory Commission. And so I am grateful to Mr. Falkus and Mr. May for serving in that role and continuing to be willing to do so for the next few years. So is there a motion to approve their reappointments?
So moved, Colin.
Moved by Colin,
Second by Ken.
second by Ken. Any discussion?
Just want to express gratitude for their dedication to the students in our community.
Absolutely. All right, thank you, Laura.
Mary Tomback,
Aye.
Ann Casey,
Aye.
Ken Morrison,
Aye.
Karen Waters,
Aye.
Colin Cox,
Aye.
Heather Wilsey,
Aye.
Laura McClendon, aye.
Passes 7-0. Lastly, it is recommended that the school board approve the updated because she thought she wanted to leave us. And then she changed her mind and realized what a terrible idea that was. The updated employment agreement between Independent School District number 283 and Flower Kutrina, the beloved, wonderful, amazing, perfect executive leadership partner for the 2020-2022 school years as presented. That is Flower's new title, Executive Leadership Partner, which we're all very grateful.
Yeah.
So is there a motion to approve Flower's new contract?
I would enthusiastically move to approve this contract.
I will second, Laura.
All right, any discussion?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does this keep Flower from leaving us ever?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. She doesn't realize that it was a little footnote in the contract that
Very good. Very good.
she's
Perfect.
prevented from ever thinking about taking another job ever again.
Okay.
All right, Laura.
Okay, Mary Tombeck.
Aye.
Ann Casey.
Aye.
Ken Morrison.
Aye.
Karen Waters.
Aye.
Colin Cox.
Aye.
Heather Wilsey.
Aye.
And Laura McClendon. Aye, sorry.
Okay, passes 7-0. Communications and transmittals.
Mary, were we not voting on the 2 policies?
I was just about to say that.
Uh-oh.
It was not on the agenda. We'd have to amend the agenda one more time.
All right, is there a motion to amend the, can we do this now? Amend the action agenda?
No, I think we should table it until our next meeting. That's
Okay.
the technical remedy.
Superintendent Osai, do you see that not adopting the COVID policy in particular would be a problem? Do we need to call a?
So if there is a need for a special meeting between now and our next meeting, I would want to just add these
Yeah.
to that agenda.
Okay, and if for some reason you feel that we need to have, if we don't have a special meeting and you want this policy in place, but practice and the schedule remains the same, and you want this policy in place before the kindergartners and first graders start on the 28th, let us know and we'll get that figured out. None of us caught that. All of us sitting here.
Yep. It's one of those days.
It's late and it apparently was late even when we started at 7, so I'm sorry about that. Does anybody have anything for communications and transmittals?
Nothing.
Yeah.
I have one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Who is it? Me?
Yeah.
I was just gonna say I went to the Peter Hobart PTO virtual meeting the other on August 24th, and it was good to participate, good to connect with all those people, and to meet the new part of their administration there, Chris Weaver, who's their elementary support supervisor, who I know has been involved with the district in the past and is now serving over at Peter Hobart, and sounds like it'll be a good opportunity and a good thing to have at Peter Hobart. There's tons of other great things they're doing in ways that they pivoted with lots of things, and you know, it's late hours and I can't remember all of them, but it was really encouraging to be a part of that and to listen in and hear what all they're doing. That's it.
Anybody else?
Nope.
You know, before Heather Wilsey ran for school board, she used to have a bedtime of like 8 o'clock at night.
I usually do. My 5 o'clock wake up tomorrow morning is going to be really rough on the second day of school.
Yes. Yeah. So sorry, Heather. One of these days we'll return to regular length meetings. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, Ken first, Colin second, Laura.
Mary Tombeck.
Aye.
Ann Casey.
Aye.
Ken Morrison.
Aye.
Karen Waters.
Aye.
Colin Cox.
Aye.
Heather Wilsey.
Aye.
And Laura McClendon. Aye.
I may move to get us back in person just to stop roll call votes.
Aye.
Every man for himself, wear your masks, stand apart from each other. Let's just stop doing roll call votes. All right. Thank you, everybody. We are adjourned at 10:34.
Good night.
Night.
Aye.
Good night, everybody.